In the banquet hall, the young guests eagerly whispered about the most important rumor. The Empire knew the name of Lady Ailsden, and all the threads converged on her. The crowd's imagination pictured a new grandiose deed for her. She was considered the true heir to the Duke of Ailsden's house. The best minds and untold riches were associated with her. The most beautiful and the most dangerous, it contained prickly thorns. She became the most discussed figure in society and politics. The excited man quickly approached, looking for confirmation of the rumors. His thoughts raced around the secret selection of his future spouse. The hall froze, catching every movement of the young lady. Natalie was lost in thought for a moment. A smile lit up her face, and the decision became clear. The young man saw rare generosity in her. The crowd felt the equality of chances as a gift. Her appearance alone was enough to make one consider oneself the chosen one. Until recently, the crowd branded her with evil nicknames. Blinded by her radiance, they choked on flattering whispers. The real reason for the marriage was hidden behind a smile and the promise of a quick selection. Even the family was unaware of the plan until Sharon approached anxiously. A misunderstanding arose, and the meaning of her words became distorted in someone else's perception. Natalie's gaze flashed with a steely determination that brooked no argument. Her choice belonged only to her, outside of anyone else's will and expectations. Sharon understood that her sister was right, but she did not find the strength to object. Noticing the guests, she greeted them with a radiant, flawless smile. Natalie addressed the lady with cold demand. There was a single, unshakable reason behind her decision. The young man noted that the rumor had already turned into a clear announcement. The intention to marry took the form of a fair competition. The crowd grasped the essence of what was intended, struck by the bold frankness. The prince smiled, alluding to his reputation as a rake and her strange closeness to him. The young lady was at a loss in the face of his bold hints. The young duke looked for hidden meaning in her harsh words. Her sigh dissolved the doubts, but the accusations continued to sound. The thought of a tamed will lay heavily on her. His words about tears and tenacity sounded almost mocking. He couldn't find an answer to why her gaze wandered among the others. This world existed according to the cruel rules of the reverse harem genre. The adult version required filling the heroes' hearts to the brim. All the conditions were met, but the finale remained out of reach. She knew about the hidden outcome, where all destinies were intertwined. Natalie saw the reason in the hero's excessive obsession. Her daring marriage plan flared up as a chance to escape. Anatole considered her naive and out of touch with reality. The three heroes were already losing their minds from painful attachment. Even her stern brother suddenly turned his anxious attention to her fate. Even her cold father now held her, as if she were a lost treasure. Natalie was at a loss, not realizing how far the game breakdown had gone. The confusion grew, clouding the mind and distorting what was happening. Recently, despair had been choking her, pushing her to a dark edge. The ridicule of the nobility hurt because of the wig that copied her sister. The family grew cold towards her, depriving her of warmth and attention. The thought of eternal dislike weighed heavily on my heart. Fate smiled upon her with strange and inexplicable luck. In the secret of her heart, she cherished the hope for change. But reality remained the same, not changing the circumstances. The first time luck touched her was when she wanted a simple hat. The lady, with a gentle smile, noted Natalie's patience, the long years of waiting, and the sacrifice she made to buy out the share for the chance. Natalie's gaze was fixed on the black hat, as if it contained a secret, disturbingly alluring and inexplicable. A vague feeling was born inside her, because the hat seemed superfluous and completely unnecessary to her. The saleswoman, with a polite smile, explained that the item was only a sample, devoid of true value. Natalie stubbornly reached out to her, while Lady confusedly reminded her of the strict rules of the old store. And everyone around looked at her choice with bewilderment, because the plain hat seemed like a strange object of desire. The lady looked at Natalie doubtfully, trying to grasp the certainty in her strange choice, and felt an alarming persistence in her determination. After leaving the store, they disappeared into the noise of the street, where the lady's curiosity only grew stronger and demanded an answer. Natalie just sighed quietly, letting her feelings speak for themselves, and admitted that the hat had captured her heart. The lady could not hide her confusion, because this choice seemed inexplicable, and even a little alarming to her. And Natalie herself could not find an answer, as if the black hat beckoned her with its quiet, almost living attraction. After weeks of silence, a sudden commotion broke the peace, and the young lady hurriedly searched for Natalie. She took a deep breath, gathering her will, and let the important secret spill out with anxious determination. The night turned into a disaster, and a merciless fire in the store destroyed everything, leaving no trace. The news she heard shook her to the depths of her soul, because the fire had turned the former world into lifeless ashes. And then the black hat revealed its true value, revealing itself to be a rare creation of a vanished collection and the only surviving treasure. A feeling of fateful luck grew stronger in her heart, as if an invisible force had already led her along this path more than once. After the unfortunate incident, Madame left the stage, and Natalie became the custodian of her latest creation. At social events, glances invariably flocked to her, as if drawn by an invisible force. Soon she was invited to the hippodrome, where excitement was in the air and promised new twists of fate. A young man appeared nearby, gently directing her attention to the upcoming races. His gesture highlighted a white horse, graceful and strong, as if created for triumph. People were already whispering about her even abroad, and her name sounded like a harbinger of a confident victory. He noted with a slight smile her liveliness, as if an indomitable energy pulsated within her. Natalie became interested in another horse, but it was immediately deemed too fragile and had no chance. With confident gentleness, he persuaded her to trust the choice and place her bet on the white favorite. However, Natalie went against the grain and chose Brown, a decision that caused widespread surprise. His smile became tense because the outcome seemed predetermined and her choice almost reckless. He tried to protect her from loss, while the hum of doubt and hushed discussions grew around him. Natalie looked intently at the young man, and with a gentle gesture allowed the beginning to happen. Confusion grew within, for the choice had been hasty, and whispers of doubt were already floating around. Suddenly, a noise cut through the air, causing her to turn around sharply and listen to what was happening. She froze, realizing the incredible fact that it was her horse that crossed the finish line first. The young man was shocked, unable to understand how inexperience had turned into a perfect hit. Natalie was only momentarily at a loss, hiding her excitement behind calm, as if everything had been an accident. At that very moment, a bright smile lit up her face, reflecting simple admiration for the beauty of the chosen horse. It was soon discovered that this steed was a rare wild stallion, with unbridled strength and natural grace. The ridicule died down in an instant, giving way to respect, and she acquired a new nickname, one filled with a hint of lightning luck. Natalie was clearly aware that of all the invitations she had received since her debut, today had turned out to be the most generous and dizzying success for her. However, she clearly felt that there was no genuine warmth or goodwill behind this attention, and yet this did not cause any disgust or protest in her soul, leaving a strange calm. But somewhere in the depths of my heart, a bitter and inexorable truth lay like a heavy shadow. She understood that all this shining attention still belonged not to her, but to her half-sister, and yet Natalie greedily dreamed of being loved as deeply and completely as she was loved. That is why she was desperate not to let this fragile luck slip through her fingers, and that is why she already knew that very soon an evening full of brilliance and new hopes awaited her. A week later, the young lady was leisurely preparing for a dazzling evening, shrouded in anticipation and quiet excitement. Her heart filled with joy at the thought of the masquerade given by Viscount Rhinefield, full of mystery and splendor. Natalie admired her new outfit with delight, as if it already reflected her future success. Among the many invitations, she chose this particular evening, alluring with its exclusivity and private luxury. She knew that her family would not object, and that she herself would be able to weave herself into new, important connections. But suddenly, she was overcome with confusion when the sky outside the window suddenly darkened and changed its mood. She froze, peering into the heavy streams of rain, and a sudden fear gripped her heart like a cold shadow. Natalie was lost in doubt, knowing that refusal would again provoke the ridicule from which she so wanted to hide. After a short struggle with herself, she stayed at home, but anxiety still did not leave her for a moment. On rainy days, the dream of a girl crying alone in a strange and cold place invariably returned to her. Her image seemed painfully familiar, but her memory remained stubbornly silent, leaving only a painful emptiness. Suddenly, she was struck by a suffocating smell of burning, and confusion instantly paralyzed her movements. My arm ached unbearably, and a sticky fear quickly spread throughout my body, sapping my strength. Before my eyes appeared my brother, lying motionless on the ground in a frightening silence. A little further away, my father lay lifeless, and this sight echoed in my soul with a cold emptiness. Tears clouded her vision, but her desperate cry was drowned in the void, finding no answer. Soon she suddenly opened her eyes, gasping for air and trying to stop shaking. The shock did not subside, because the pain in the body and the brightness of what I saw seemed frighteningly real. At that very moment, a young man burst into the room, and his movements betrayed a sense of suppressed rage. Natalie sighed heavily, trying to find calm and hold on to the elusive reality. Anatole was looking for an answer in a hurry, and the anxiety in his gaze betrayed hidden fear. Natalia froze, simultaneously explaining that she had been asleep and had not attended the ball, while not understanding why Anatole was so nervous. His fury fell upon her with words about the illegal substances found at the masquerade, and shock pierced Natalie through and through. She learned that all the guests had been detained and were now being held in prison, and her heart sank with horror. Anatole shouted, explaining that the drug found violated imperial law, and punishment affected everyone for treason. Natalie was stunned when she remembered the rare limited edition hat now linked to this nightmare. The memory of the crazy pile of gold coins won at the racetrack came to mind, and my heart sank at the memory. Miraculously, she managed to avoid the terrible accusation of treason, and relief instantly enveloped her soul. But suddenly, the fear washed over her again, reminding her of a recent strange dream, and Natalie pulled her brother, begging him to leave. He pushed her away angrily, demanding to know if she had finally realized that their situation was extremely dangerous. Anatole angrily demanded an explanation from his sister, accusing her of causing complete chaos. Natalie froze, not understanding what he was talking about, her eyes wide in surprise. He continued shouting, reminding that he had warned about several viscounts with the same surname in the capital. Natalie tried to explain that the reply had been sent correctly, but her words were lost in her brother's anger. He did not listen to her and persistently wanted to understand how she could direct her answer to a dishonest and treacherous person. Rage burst out of him again, because after what had happened, he and his father received a summons to the imperial city. She looked away coldly and delivered the order, while the butler froze with the tray. Tension hung in the air, and her hand trembled slightly. She clenched her fingers in confusion, realizing her mistake. Her voice wavered, her gaze dimmed, because she had ordered everything to be cleaned up, not knowing who it was from. She jerked her head up, stepped forward, and with a cold glint in her eyes, brought down a reproach, demanding an explanation as the silence thickened around her. His gaze flashed scarlet, and Anatole abruptly ripped off his wig, revealing the truth. The tension exploded as he furiously demanded that the pretense end. Natalie froze, her breath caught in her throat, her confused gaze darting around, her fingers trembling as reality suddenly crashed down on her, leaving her without any support. She clutched the strand in her fingers, her gaze warming and dimming at the same time. Pain flared inside her, because this wig meant much more to her than it seemed. Her gaze hardened, her voice broke off inside her. A dull rage flared in the silence, as if a wall of misunderstanding had grown between them. She often looked at the reflection, where the warm family seemed like a distant shadow. Her heart sank because her mother had left too early, leaving only a quiet emptiness. The girl stood quietly in the dim light, looking straight at her. Tension tingled in the air as a familiar presence broke the heavy silence. Natalie froze, listening to distant memories. Someone else's fate touched her heart, leaving an anxious trace and a quiet sense of duty. Natalie turned sharply, peering warily at the stranger. The air tightened, and mistrust and hidden anxiety flashed in her eyes. Sharon smiled softly as she stepped forward, her gaze warm, but with a strange confidence beneath it, as if everything had already been decided. They stood side by side, like reflections of different destinies. From that moment on, their paths intertwined, changing the familiar order in the future. She was painfully aware of how what belonged to her was being quietly taken away from her. Her anxiety grew, and a sense of injustice squeezed her heart. He spoke with a gentle smile, gesturing casually. There was a hidden confidence and slight detachment in his calm. The Duke touched her head warmly, and she beamed with joy. At that moment, the concern was not directed at her, and that was what hurt the most. She froze, stunned, her eyes trembling. The realization hit her sharply, for she had never experienced such kindness. She tried her best, clinging to hope, but instead of warmth came reproach, and everything inside her broke off painfully. The maid leaned over quietly and gently stopped her, offering a cautious warning. Her voice betrayed concern for the girl and fear of the consequences. The Duke looked at his daughter with a mocking expression, reproaching her for the new problems. The tension in the room thickened, and his words sounded like a cold accusation. Sharon spoke softly, trying to ease the tension, her voice cautiously supportive and hopeful that things could still be fixed. Natalie frowned, holding back her irritation. Her gaze turned cold, and discontent grew inside her. as if every word only made her angrier. Anatole intervened sharply, indignantly defending Sharon. His voice was harsh, and his movements were filled with obvious threat and displeasure. Anatole cautiously promised to punish Natalie, trying to calm Sharon. She only smiled softly, hiding her pain, as if she had long since come to terms with this attitude. The Duke narrowed his eyes coldly, reminding him of the past. His words sounded harsh, as if leaving him no choice and crushing him with a heavy memory. Anatole shuddered and stepped back, lowering his gaze. The ladies discussed in hushed tones, recalling that the men of the Aylesden family were considered chosen by the world and endowed with special powers, exchanging glances with secret meaning. She cowered, hiding her face. Other people's words about her powerlessness cut painfully into her consciousness, forcing her to doubt herself. The ladies discussed quietly, recalling the green eyes of the late Duchess and making an obvious comparison, exchanging suggestive glances. She shuddered and turned around sharply. A disturbing question flashed through her thoughts, whether her fate had been mixed up, and this hurt her deeply. She stubbornly clung to the desire to be loved, despite the cold. Even understanding her shortcomings, she could not give up this pain. Natalie turned around sharply, her voice breaking with surprise. Her heart began to beat faster, as if a sudden realization had hit her. She froze, staring straight ahead, the name hanging in the silence, and with it came a tense anticipation. Sharon apologized quietly, admitting her guilt. She defended herself, insisting it was just an oversight, and her voice was soft and careful. Sharon calmly explained that she had packed everything herself and apologized to Natalie with gentle sadness, as if she was genuinely worried about her. Natalie looked up sharply, tension flashing in her eyes. A thought pierced her, and doubt gave way to internal protest. Anatole intervened coolly, smoothing over Sharon's words but shifting the blame. His hand rested on her head, cementing the silent accusation. Natalie was breaking down, gasping for breath. She didn't understand why Sharon was treated so gently, while her mistakes were turned into disasters. The response was a cold assessment. Her words were devalued, and in the silence, there remained only a bitter hopelessness. She was told to go away and think. She slumped, broken, as their silhouettes turned away, cutting her off completely from the warmth. Sharon spoke softly, justifying her brother. Her words were calm but condescending, as if everything that was happening was normal. Natalie lowered her head, clutching herself. Pain and resentment merged, and a desperate feeling of injustice grew inside her. She suddenly snapped to attention, defending her own. Her voice rose to a scream as she defended her family and her place in it. Sharon fell. The scene erupted in tension. The maid covered her face in horror, not believing what had happened. Sharon calmly intervened, containing the situation. The maid anxiously asked her to leave, trying to prevent further conflict. Natalie stood frozen, staring into space. The silence after they left was oppressive, and a cold, dull ache slowly grew inside her. Natalie sank to her knees, overcome with despair. Everything inside her faded away, and the only thought that remained was an empty, heavy hopelessness. She looked up at the cold sky, realizing the immutability of fate. Hope crumbled, leaving only a deafening silence. Her thoughts were confused. She didn't care how it all ended. Fear and fatigue intertwined, erasing the boundaries between life and the end. The wind ruffled her hair, and a feeling of uselessness grew inside her. She seemed to be dissolving into the night, losing herself. Deep inside, a last desire glimmered, to be loved at least once, before everything finally disappeared. In their world, there was a beloved daughter, and another, dark, unnecessary. The choice was obvious, and Natalie, squeezing through the pain, finally decided to become what they wanted her to be. The shadow leaned towards her, whispering with a quiet mockery, the words penetrating her consciousness, making her doubt reality itself. She looked up at the sky, where everything seemed alien. The thought of the unreality of the world pierced her like a sudden awakening. Natalie froze, realizing the truth. Memories returned, and a cold understanding of what was happening flared inside her. In the silence, the final thought rang out. This world turned out to be just a game, where feelings and destinies were just an illusion. It all started with a reverse harem game, where she knew every twist and turn of the plot. Obsessed to the point of obsession, she remained the best for years until reality became her. In just one night, she had been knocked off her perch, and hiding an irritated grin, she realized who exactly had caused this fall. She thought with irritation that her rival was again taking away everything important from her, as if it was no longer enough for her. The lady thought about the full version. Her gaze became focused, as if a new opportunity had appeared to change everything. Realization flashed suddenly. The thought of accessing the full version caught her attention, and doubt gave way to interest. She leaned forward with determination, her confidence returning, as she now had a chance to reclaim her first place. The lady woke up in the body of a baby, shocked by what was happening. Her consciousness did not immediately accept the new reality. The realization came suddenly. She realized that she had found herself in a game and had been reborn, retaining the memory of the past. Natalie noticed the changes. There was no exit system, and the plot was different, as if the rules of the world had already been rewritten. Key differences emerged, the roles were reversed, and even the main character occupied a completely different place in the story. She gathered her thoughts and decided to use the time. A plan formed to grow up, take control, and find a way back. Madame tenderly compared her daughter to the dawn, calling her beloved, enveloping her in words full of warmth and affection. She accepted this caress with quiet joy, as if she had finally received what she had dreamed of for so long. She admitted that from an early age, she understood her position, realizing that she was inside the game. Natalie recalled that it all started before Sharon arrived. Back then, she believed she could grow up, quickly overcome all the trials, and return to her own world. She spent more and more time with Sharon, and little by little, the line between the game and reality began to blur. The thought struck her suddenly. She had forgotten the truth too quickly, allowing her feelings to drag her deeper. She desperately reached out to her father and brother, trying to earn their love, even if it destroyed her from the inside. But the more she tried, the more she became distant from her family. Natalie envied Sharon, surrounded by warmth and attention, and, losing herself, gradually dissolved into someone else's imposed image. Natalie was overcome with despair, and it flashed through her mind that one fatal step could lock her forever in this merciless game. Natalie realized with quiet relief that her memory had returned just in time, because a little more, and she would have had to endure the same painful trials again. Natalie involuntarily stepped on the wig, and at that moment she was overcome with confusion as reality shook, revealing the hidden truth before her eyes. Natalie realized with a bitter smile how pathetic she had been before, feeling a quiet self-contempt rising inside her. In her thoughts, the old image crumbled, giving way to light, bright and pure, like the morning sun, filling everything around with warmth. Natalie accepted the feeling calmly, realizing that the new reflection had finally become truly her own. Natalie resolutely collected her thoughts, realizing that the moment had come to plan an escape, while remembering that in this game, everything revolved around three key men, one of whom was the brilliant crown prince. A cold northern duke emerged in her memory, distant from everyone, but capable of warmth only towards the one he recognized as his own. Then, the image of the owner of the mansion appeared, mad and dangerous, whose power inspired fear and promised destruction to anyone who came close. Natalie understood that as soon as these men's feelings intensified, their attachment would become dangerous, turning into something uncontrollable and dark. Natalie knew with cold certainty that the moment when all three would be close was already close, and this would only accelerate the inevitable development of events. Natalie realized that all her luck was not random, but born of knowledge hidden in the subconscious. Although the events themselves remained unchanged, Natalie froze in alarm, and a sudden thought flashed through her mind as she remembered how, in the original version of the story, it all began with the heroine's visit to the estate. Natalie realized with growing horror that the fire monsters could appear again, because her premonitions were right, and this meant that this place really would be under threat of attack. Natalie understood that her position paved the way for a meeting with the main characters, and, not wanting to miss the chance, she decided to act, because otherwise the duchy would face destruction. Natalie, with concentrated determination, came to the conclusion that the first step would be a meeting with him, because everything that followed depended on it. Natalie remembered the man blessed by God, the most powerful water mage in history, Roger Crawford, whose appearance could change everything. Natalie realized that the blessing of the water god, which granted strength and love, in fact turned into a cruel curse hidden behind an imaginary gift. Natalie noted his condition with alarm, realizing that over time, he would find himself in trouble and would probably need her help. Natalie pauses by the window, gazing at the familiar outlines where the past pulls her back. Her heart sinks, because the Crawford estate awaits her ahead. The coachman announces his arrival with restraint, asking for caution. Natalie steps out, her movements smooth, but a sense of foreboding grows within her. At the entrance, she notices the emptiness and looks around in bewilderment. The man next to her calmly explains the rare visits and the small number of servants. Natalie freezes, her gaze growing cold. A different memory emerges in her mind. This place was once full of people, and the discrepancy unsettles her more and more. The man thoughtfully admits that the owner left the estate only at night, when there was not a soul left around. Natalie quietly accepts this, realizing that her memories of the place may not have been entirely accurate. She notes that for a ducal family, the estate appears to be in poor condition and is clearly not being used properly. As Natalie surveys the grounds, she notices that despite the desolation, the size and layout of the garden remain exactly as she remembers. Her anxiety increases. Everything seems abandoned, and she can't help but think that something strange might have happened here. The raven suddenly took flight, startling Natalie. She flinched and covered her face, suddenly feeling uneasy. She looked around warily, feeling that there was someone hidden nearby. A man appears before her, surrounded by water. His cold gaze makes it clear that guests were not expected. He becomes more rigid, demanding an explanation, and his power presses noticeably on the space around him. Natalie gathered her courage and calmly introduced herself, trying not to betray the growing tension. Natalie calmly introduced herself and emphasized her position, making it clear that her words were not random and required attention. Containing her excitement, she insistently made it clear that the conversation was necessary, leaving no room for refusal. The man reacted with distrust, doubting that she could even have business with him, and withdrew. Natalie, sensing his doubts, approached him and with cold confidence got to the point, hinting at an important proposal. The Duke narrowed his eyes. His gaze grew colder. He silently assessed her words, hiding his interest behind a restrained expression and slight tension on his face. Natalie tilted her head with a slight smile and proposed a deal, her gaze confident, as if she already knew the outcome. Left alone with her thoughts, she held the cup, hiding her anxiety, thinking about the Duke's reaction and the possible consequences. She watched the maid carefully, sensing something strange in her behavior, as if she was showing too much interest. Doubts gripped her, her fingers touched her lips, and her gaze darkened. What was happening did not add up, and this caused anxiety. The maid, trembling with excitement, silently gave out the news of Roger's ruin, and Natalie froze, her gaze darkening with sudden realization. The Duke coldly ordered them to be left alone, without even looking at the maid, his tone calm but unyielding. The embarrassed maid quickly agreed, holding back her awkwardness, and left the room, casting a quick glance at the guests. The Duke, hiding his fatigue, took a sip of tea and reservedly admitted that he had not expected a visit, his gaze sliding to the side. Natalie smiled softly and waved her hand, relieving the tension, her calm contrasting with the growing internal calculation. The Duke frowned and coldly inquired about the reason for her visit, his gaze becoming intense and intense. Natalie, clasping her hands, warned of the impending threat with a serious expression, her voice trembling with hidden haste. A grim image flashed before her mind's eye. The house was engulfed in flames, the darkness thickened, and everything ended in death. The Duke doubted her words with a cold smile, hinting at the absurdity, his gaze becoming sharp and distrustful. Natalie calmly confirmed the seriousness of her intentions, confidently guiding the conversation towards the outcome she desired. With a slight smile, she made it clear that faith was not required, but her suggestion was far more important than what she said. The Duke narrowed his eyes with interest. His tone became softer, a hint of play and hidden interest appeared in it. Natalie approached, and lowering her gaze, offered a condition, to become his companion at the ball, sealing her deal. The Duke dismissed her words with irritation, considering them a waste of time, and coldly made it clear that he saw no advantage in confidently doing without her. Natalie calmly placed her hand on the table, hinting that her request was not so simple. Her voice was soft but concealed confidence and calculation. The Duke tensed, reacting with restraint, and she, without hesitation, revealed the essence, protection in exchange for help. Her gaze became firm and piercing. Natalie leaned forward and extended her hand, her gaze focused and her voice calm and confident. The Duke responded with restraint, but nevertheless offered her his hand, carefully watching her every movement, hiding his curiosity. Their fingers touched, and a strange sensation flashed between them, making the air seem to tremble. The Duke frowned, trying to understand what was happening, but he could not catch anything obvious. Only a slight tension remained. His gaze darkened, interest flashed in his eyes, and he looked at Natalie differently, sensing a hidden secret. As he touched her, Natalie felt his strength fade, and a flash of surprise crossed his gaze, and she immediately directed the conversation, increasing her influence. Calmly but insistently, she exposed his vulnerability, making it clear that without control at the ball, he risked breaking down, her words sounding like inevitability. The Duke fell silent, feeling a change inside him, his doubts battling with his reason, But in the end, he acknowledged her arguments and accepted the terms. Natalie thanked him with a soft smile, hiding her triumph, and made it clear that his decision was already playing into her hands. The Duke's face darkened sharply, and he made a condition, hinting that without proof, he would consider her words a deception. His strength stirred again. Natalie accepted this calmly. Her gaze became even more confident, and with a touch of intrigue, she indicated a new meeting, strengthening the game. The Duke responded with restraint, accepting her terms. His voice remained cold, but there was already a hidden agreement in it. Natalie allowed herself a slight smile as she left the room, confident that the meeting had gone exactly as she had planned. In her thoughts, everything lined up into a clear plan. She would become his shield, and he would become her weapon in the coming game. The butler quietly announced Natalie's return, asking the Duke if he trusted the lady. The Duke quietly admitted that her look was too sincere to be a lie, and holding her hand, he wondered if there was more behind it. The Duke, standing in the shadows, acknowledged the possibility thoughtfully, his gaze softening as if he were allowing himself to doubt. The memory came back to him, and he thought with a heavy heart about the chance to atone for his past guilt. He clenched his hand, casting aside his hesitation, and coldly gathering himself, preparing for the following night, when everything would be decided. Natalie, clutching the door handle, thought anxiously about her family, and decided to hold on until she gathered her strength. Her name was called and she started, turning around with a forced smile, hiding the tension inside her. Sharon approached anxiously, asking where she had been, peering closely into her face. Natalie waved her hand dismissively, feigning calm, but a hint of weariness flashed in her gaze. The girl flushed with excitement, reproaching her for the risk, and reached closer, not hiding her concern. Natalie froze, catching the whispers of the maids. Her gaze darkened, and her heart sank. Behind her back, they were already starting to discuss her disappearance. Natalie, hiding, heard the maids whispering about the ban and her exit, condemning her stubbornness and hinting at misconduct. They exchanged glances, discussing her family and calling it difficult, as if her behavior only confirmed other people's expectations. Sharon, clutching the gift, quietly admitted that she had been worried about Natalie, and looking down, tried to ease her anxiety with a sincere gesture. Sharon, with a hint of hope, handed over the paint, reminding her of her desire, and gently hinted that the changes could be made easier by observing the reaction. Natalie thanked her and declined. The girl turned to Natalie with concern, afraid that she had made a mistake, and sincerely regretted it, barely holding back her tears. Natalie calmly dismissed her fears, making it clear that what happened was not her fault. With a slight detachment, she added that now all this no longer mattered to her. Natalie gently touched her hair, noting its beauty and causing a timid hope in the girl. However, a certain confidence flashed in her gaze, for she believed that her own beauty was in no way inferior. Sharon stood quietly by the door when the maids noticed that she was covered in dirt and rushed to her anxiously. One of them carefully took her hands, trying to tidy her up, not hiding her concern for her condition. Sharon, with a gentle smile, assured her that everything was fine if it would help Natalie feel better. The maids looked at each other, and surprise flashed in their eyes, because a change was felt in the girl's behavior. They whispered quietly, noticing that Natalie had changed and had even abandoned her wig, which seemed strange and suspicious to them. Anatole called out to Natalie sharply, angrily reminding her that he had not allowed her to leave the room and was clearly irritated by her actions. She calmly admitted that she had intended to apologize, which only left him more puzzled by her sudden submissiveness. Natalie stated with cold clarity that she understood the inconvenience caused and was prepared to behave quietly, obediently, and impeccably in the future. Anatole was confused, not recognizing her, sensing something unusual and alarming in her words. She calmly questioned the sincerity of his demands, as if testing the limits of his power over her, and, after restrainedly suggesting that he teach her a lesson himself, Natalie seemed to hand the initiative over to him. In the drawn-out silence, she coldly assessed the situation, believing that such a step should be enough to continue the game. Natalie calmly allowed the thought of punishment, as if testing his reaction, which threw Anatole off balance. With a hint of mockery, she noted that such apologies were usually not accepted, making it clear that she was not seeking forgiveness. Natalie admitted that she just wants to take responsibility and leave this place as quickly as possible. Anatole, without hiding his bewilderment, tried to understand her true intentions, feeling that there was something more hidden behind her words. At that moment, Sharon's sudden appearance broke the tense scene as she rushed towards him with a desperate cry, unable to contain her emotions. Sharon anxiously asked not to scold Natalie too harshly, trying to protect her, and steer the situation away from conflict. Anatole calmly agreed to postpone the conversation, but his gesture revealed hidden irritation and tension. He coldly reminded her that he would decide on punishment later, making it clear that he was still in control of what was happening. Natalie calmly noted that she had deliberately provoked him in order to gain the opportunity to go out. Noticing how his demeanor remained restrained, Natalie coldly pushed thoughts of her brother aside, focusing on the main thing. That very night, the Eilson estate would be engulfed in flames. Natalie watched calmly as events unfolded, realizing that everything was proceeding according to a familiar scenario, and that nothing was deviating from the previous course of events. With cold confidence, she decided not to allow any other outcome, relying entirely on her knowledge. The night seemed ordinary, but the weight of impending disaster was already felt in the air. Natalie understood that the estate would soon descend into chaos. A sudden explosion shattered the silence, and flames engulfed the estate, turning it into chaos. People screamed in panic about monsters, realizing that this was not just a fire, but an attack by magical beasts. Natalie, keeping her mind clear, remembered that in this chaos, Roger had to save the heroine first. She resolutely walked away, realizing that now it was time for her to act and leave this place as quickly as possible. Natalie was shocked because she didn't expect anything like this. The flames crept up to her steps, and anxiety thickened, as if fate itself was holding its breath before the fateful moment. In the scarlet light, her silhouette seemed fragile, but inside there was a stubborn calm brewing, as if she had already accepted the coming blow. A fiery whirlwind exploded into the night, engulfing the palace, and the air trembled with fury, turning everything around into a raging sea of fire. The young man with the blade froze, feeling the pressure of a force before which even courage began to seem a fragile illusion. The Duke gripped the hilt tighter, suppressing his doubts, because retreat was impossible when danger loomed over his loved ones. He called out to the Duke of Eilsden on noticing his arrival, and hastened to report that the young ladies appeared to be locked inside the room. The young man continued to explain the situation with alarm, out of breath from the rush, while the feeling of impending disaster grew around them. The Duke frowned, not understanding why they were there, and the thought echoed in him as a dull, growing unease. Suddenly, his attention shifted to what was happening ahead, and he ordered a look, catching something disturbing amid the fire and chaos. Natalie noted with alarm that today she would not be able to open the usual path of salvation, and this realization lay like a cold weight on her heart. Through the heat and chaos, a desperate cry reached her, filled with panic and an attempt to make her run away immediately. The young man, clutching his sword, exclaimed that Sharon was still inside, and a sharp, undisguised alarm was evident in his voice. Without wasting a second, the Duke urged his horse forward, determined to rush into the very heat of the moment, where every spark threatened to be the last. She, restraining her inner trembling, assured herself that help was already close, and clung to this thought as to her only support. With tense determination, she explained that they needed to jump down to them as soon as they had the chance, trying to suppress their fear and instill confidence. Sharon, shaking with terror, admitted that she could not bring herself to jump, and her doubts gripped her body more tightly than the raging flames around her. Natalie, suppressing her fear, desperately convinced her friend that there was still a way out, and her eyes burned with determination to save her at any cost. The next moment, she pushed Sharon forward sharply, forcing her to take a step toward salvation, sacrificing trust for the only chance of survival. Sharon fell down, and at the last moment found herself in the safe arms of Anatole, who caught her, preventing the flames from taking another life. He hugged her, catching his breath, realizing that he had managed to save her, but worry for Natalie was already squeezing his heart. Natalie, remaining in the midst of the fire, looked forward with a bitter smile, as if taking upon herself the full wrath of the raging elements. Anatole looked up sharply and pointed forward, noticing something alarming, causing anxiety to flare up in his chest again. The Duke, bursting into the chaos, suddenly noticed an unfamiliar silhouette, and his gaze became wary, as if he felt the intervention of an alien force. At that very moment, the flame collided with the stream of water, and the fiery monster howled, not expecting such a confrontation that tore its rage apart. Amidst bursts of light and spray, she found herself in the air, and the stranger gently caught her, as if snatching her from the embrace of death. The space around seemed to distort, filled with a cold glow, where salvation was intertwined with a sense of mystery and hidden power. Natalie looked at him with a slight smile, realizing that it was all over, and her gratitude had dissolved into the calm after the storm. Roger expressed restrained gratitude to Natalie for saving her, but his cold gaze betrayed a lack of softness, creating a tense and unsettling atmosphere. Natalie sensed this detachment and felt that beneath Roger's outward calm lurked something dangerous and difficult to predict. There was a shadow of cruelty in his behavior, and even his rare smile seemed more like a warning than a sign of sincerity. The Duke's appearance upset the delicate balance, and the air seemed to grow heavier, filling with hidden tension and wariness. The Duke watched silently, noting that he had previously remained in the shadows, but now the looks of those around him clearly revealed their anxiety and uncertainty. Natalie decided not to go into further explanations, maintaining an outward calm so as not to let the situation get completely out of control. The Duke, remaining cool and collected, made it clear by his appearance that he intended to act decisively, leaving no room for retreat for anyone. Natalie noticed with slight dismay that his gaze was directed not at her, but at Roger, and this gave rise to a quiet but persistent uneasiness. There was a murmur of confusion nearby, and both of them, confused by what was happening, tried to understand the reason for the strange tension that hung between them. Anatole sharply pulls up the Duke of Crawford, reminding him of honor and the inadmissibility of touching a young lady from another, higher family. The old Duke imperiously calls Natalie to him, bringing the events back under his control. Coming closer, Natalie thanks Roger with genuine trepidation for saving her, softening the tense atmosphere. Natalie, smiling shyly, suggests moving into the living room, trying to diffuse the awkwardness of the moment. Roger calmly agrees, noting that the Aylesden family needs an explanation. Soon everyone is gathered together, and a tense conversation takes shape in the silence of the room. In the living room, Natalie gently thanks Roger, but he only calmly replies that he has done his duty. The old Duke questions Roger closely, trying to understand how he got there in time. Roger explains in a measured tone that chance led him into danger where the threat was already gathering. Natalie, having collected her thoughts, acknowledges his help and thinks about a worthy way to thank him. Roger, softening slightly, admits that he would not refuse a token of gratitude. He reveals his intention. The upcoming Imperial Ball requires a companion, and so Roger turns his gaze to Natalie, wanting to see her next to him. Anatole notes with restraint that simple gratitude is not enough for equal repayment. Natalie, inspired, readily accepts his offer to accompany her to the ball. However, Roger gently declines such a gesture, preferring another way to show sincerity. Anatole tries to intervene, but is met with a cold reminder of propriety. The old Duke abruptly cuts off unnecessary words, returning the conversation to the bounds of etiquette. Roger, not paying any attention to this, calmly ends the discussion. He emphasizes that Natalie's presence at the ball is already sufficient gratitude. Roger, having made his decision, is about to leave, ending the conversation. Natalie gently stops him, offering to stay and share the morning meal. Maintaining a warm persistence, she takes care of the guest, wanting to personally see him off. Anatole freezes. Stupefaction paralyzes his movements, and confusion flares up in the glitter of gilding, heavy as a sudden collapse of awareness. The Duke maintains an icy calm, and in the solemn silence of the hall, his determination sounds silent, heavy, like a sentence that leaves no way back. The Duke, asking for forgiveness, stated that Anatole had urgent business, so they were leaving. Roger Crawford coldly replied that he agreed with this. The Duke ordered Anatole to follow him into the office. Anatole quietly agreed, accepting his father's order. Anatole, bowing his head, bitterly admits that he has dishonored the family's honor in front of others, and finds neither justification nor peace. The Duke coldly cuts off his fall, cutting the content and forcing him to reflect on his own shame with a heavy reproach. Anatole, barely holding back his trembling, tries to object, but his words get stuck, breaking against his father's icy silence. A shadow of hope flashes in him at the thought of Natalie, like the last light in the depths of guilt. The thought of Natalie flashes in him with a quiet hope, like a light in the midst of gloomy condemnation. His anxiety grows, and he insists that she must be protected from dangerous proximity to the Duke of Crawford. A fateful scenario emerges in his imagination, where the band breaks like the thin glass of fate. He sees how everything is working out too perfectly, as if fate itself is pushing her towards a fatal feeling. The image of Natalie appears before him, fragile, yearning for warmth, lost in childish melancholy. And now, her coldness towards them cuts even more deeply, because someone else's gaze has become more important to her than her family's. In despair, he admits, this choice will not bring her happiness, but will only deepen the abyss. The shadow of anxiety thickens, promising new troubles if her heart is carried away by mistake. The Duke, with his back turned, throws a cold question about Sharon, like a new blow that cannot be dodged. The weight of the title falls on my shoulders like a cold cloak, and in the thick twilight, the thought of Sharon matures, alarming and inexorably burning. The awareness of the prohibition sounds firm and unwavering, like a long-accepted rule that is not subject to discussion. Of Netanya comes to mind, complex, capricious, filled with contradictions, and childish stubborn disobedience. Interest in what is happening seems fleeting, like a spark doomed to quickly go out in the cold of circumstances. Anatole makes his decision with grim determination, allowing the responsibility to fall on his shoulders like a heavy burden, cutting off unnecessary doubts and hesitations. Anatole takes responsibility with restraint, deciding to distance himself from her, and there is a cold, heavy determination in this decision. The Duke turns away to the cold light, and in the silence, his thoughts grow heavy, overgrown with strict, indisputable boundaries. A prohibition clearly emerges in his consciousness. Contact with Netanya is permissible only in cases of extreme necessity. Anatole nodded slightly, and this quiet gesture reflected a learned submission, behind which lurked a heavy, unexpressed bitterness. Roger turned, his gaze flickering with reserved attention, as Natalie appeared with graceful politeness. Natalie stepped into the light, her justification soft and like a carefully considered gesture. She thanked him with a slight smile, hiding behind it an attentive, cautious assessment. Roger answered calmly, and his manner conveyed the confidence of a man who remembered the terms of their engagement. Their eyes met, and in that moment, there was a flash of unspoken understanding and hidden anticipation. Natalie continued the conversation, and behind the gentleness of her demeanor, one could discern a persistent, barely perceptible purpose. Roger remained calm, but a shadow of incomprehension flitted across his gaze, as if there was a meaning hidden behind Natalie's words that eluded him. Roger noticed that at Elliston, only guests seemed to eat, and there was a subtle, almost mocking observation in his tone. Roger recalled that Natalie herself had spoken of her refusal to eat, and there was a hidden insistence in his calm. Natalie looked at him softly, and there was a subtle, almost playful surprise in her question about his concern. A glimmer of doubt crossed her mind, and she decided not to trust him unconditionally just yet, keeping a cautious distance. Silence fell on the table, and in that silence hung a tension filled with unspoken feelings. Roger's thoughts faltered for a moment, and a strange doubt flashed through them. At odds with his usual cold assessment, Natalie gently cut off the conversation, and a slight carelessness flashed in her gesture, concealing an inner calculation. A determination arose in her mind, not to let the situation get out of control, despite the strangeness of what was happening. She confessed her dreams, and a shadow of anxious sincerity flashed in her gaze for a moment. Roger caught it and calmly developed the thought, linking her words with dark images that sounded almost like a guess. Natalie continued with a slight smile, and there was a knowingness in her tone that hinted at more than was apparent. Roger thoughtfully noted that her dreams seemed too convincing, but his calm was tinged with doubt and an attempt to figure things out. He continued his reasoning, and his words revealed a cold logic that sought to connect facts and hidden motives. Natalie easily cut off the line of conversation, leaving behind a soft promise of a new meeting. In their proximity, a strange, almost dangerous attraction flared up for a moment, breaking the usual boundaries. Roger pulled back, his voice filled with genuine but restrained confusion. Natalie just smiled, and there was a hint of lightness in her answer that hid something much deeper. He stood at the stall, and the luxury, inaccessible, without the imperial will, now seemed strangely distant and alien to him. Natalie confessed her hunger with a light frankness that concealed a game and subtle calculation. Roger's thoughts darkened, and the habit of succumbing to her influence surfaced, causing a quiet, nagging feeling of guilt. He touched the horse, and the gesture reflected a rare softness, as if trying to find support in something simple and honest. Sharon appeared with respectful reserve, and there was a quiet determination in her voice that concealed her nervousness. A moment later, she couldn't bear it any longer and rushed towards Roger, clinging to him as if seeking protection from the growing anxiety. Sharon apologized sheepishly, her gaze flickering with awkwardness, mixed with a subtle hint of excitement. She introduced herself with quiet determination, as if gathering her strength for something more significant. Roger listened to her in silence, and for a moment, a tense, wary attention flickered in his cold gaze. Sharon turned to Roger with sincere gratitude, but he gently stopped her, making it clear that there was no need and everything had already been decided. Sharon sheepishly tried to apologize and explain that her father hadn't told her anything yet, but she still wanted to sincerely thank him. Roger calmly clarified that he was talking about Natalie, steering the conversation in the right direction with cool confidence. Sharon realized what was said and accepted it quietly, a look of guarded understanding flickering in her eyes. She decided to leave, trying to maintain her dignity, but her haste betrayed her inner turmoil. Roger stopped her, warning her that such actions could lead to dangerous consequences and put them in an awkward position. Sharon froze, overcome with anxiety and confusion, not knowing what to do next. Roger concluded coldly, making it clear that he should take his leave, closing the conversation for good. Sharon remained silent, her silence filled with a heavy realization, as if the past had slipped through her fingers. She admitted that Roger didn't remember her, and a quiet disappointment, mixed with anticipation, flickered through her thoughts. But, holding back her emotions, she decided not to rush things, allowing time to take its course. A shadow of confidence appeared in her smile, as if she already knew that one day everything would change. The name Natalie Easton came into his mind, and in that moment he felt a strange, almost imperceptible change, realizing that this was a different woman. The discovery created a quiet internal shift, leaving behind a sense of wary yet compelling awareness. He was told that Lady Natalie of House Easton had sent a gift and a letter, and there was already a sense of deliberate intent in this gesture. Roger listened to the explanation of modesty, but behind the words, there was a subtle justification for the value of the gift. Natalie's letter was filled with hope, and its neat lines concealed a desire to invisibly influence the course of the future. Roger indifferently ordered the letter to be left behind, and in his calmness, there was a detached, almost habitual coldness. The servant hastily confirmed, and his words sounded confidently, expecting the young lady's approval. As Roger read on, he caught the thoughtful suggestion in the letter, which contained a well-thought-out hint. His gaze became more attentive as the meaning of the words was revealed, leaving behind a slight bewilderment. My thoughts darkened for a moment, and a guess about a strange persistence that repeated itself over and over again flashed through them. However, an unexpected warmth followed, and the memory of care echoed with a quiet, long-forgotten feeling. The image of a child surfaced in his memory, and this thought echoed with a heavy suspicion of a strange connection between times and destinies. Roger considered the coincidence, and for the first time a feeling of possible retribution for the past arose in his thoughts. Anatole turned to Natalie again with a warning, but behind the stern words, there was a worry that he did not acknowledge. In response, Natalie accepted his reproaches with restraint, but her tone already betrayed weariness from the endless accusations. Her calm gradually gave way to cold determination, and something frighteningly distant flashed in her gaze. She rejected the need to be understood, allowing even greater distance to grow between them. And in her last words, there was a final dismissal, as if she herself had chosen a path on which there was no longer a place for him. Sharon reminded her brother that such moments were rare, and her words carried a quiet desire to preserve this fragile opportunity to be together. Natalie wearily cut off the conversation, declaring that she had had enough for today, and her words suggested a desire to escape from unnecessary tension. Seeing Roger, she internally pulled away and decided to leave him early, leaving behind a cold, unyielding distance. Anatole noted with a slight grin that walking to the palace was a dubious undertaking, but he still allowed her to do things her way. Natalie accepted this with enthusiasm, thanking him and promising to meet him at the palace, keeping her voice light. However, Anatole immediately became serious, and a hidden tension appeared in his gaze, preventing him from letting go of the situation. He called out to her, stopping her, and in this gesture, one could already sense a change of mind. In the end, he gave in, but took control into his own hands, deciding to accompany her personally and leave her no choice. Sharon asked with slight bewilderment about an escort, but immediately suggested that they all go together, hiding behind family closeness. The response was a soft but sharp agreement, allowing this idea only in a formal, almost mocking form. Anatole called out to her sharply, and his voice was filled with alarm, not hiding the sudden tension. Natalie turned around with quiet confidence, as if she had already been expecting the right person to appear. A glimmer of satisfaction crossed her eyes when she saw Roger, and in that moment, everything fell into place. Natalie acknowledged the unexpected meeting with a gentle smile and reminded him that the gift she had sent him should have been suitable. Roger calmly replied that he would not refuse his partner's gift, accepting her rules of the game. She emphasized his role, reproaching him for trying to leave, and persistently returning to the need to accompany her to the palace. The thought of the palace flashed through her mind as a key point behind which another meaning of what was happening was hidden. Her reasoning revealed an understanding of the game, where the choice of partner opened a quick path to the goal, and, assessing Roger, She found him suitable, noting his character and growing importance to herself. A look of determination flashed in her eyes, and the intention to attract the crown prince's attention clearly formed in her thoughts. Roger announced his arrival with a calm, measured restraint in every movement. He helped her out, and in this gesture, there was a sense of emphasized politeness, bordering on attentive caution. Natalie approached, promising to take care of him, and there was a quiet confidence in her words addressed to the Duke of Crawford. There was a murmur in the hall, and in the muffled hum of voices, surprise flashed at the sight of the girl next to the Duke of Crawford. Some recognized her as Lady Easton, and their guesses were tinged with hidden shock and disbelief. Others recalled her family's dark reputation, their words tinged with wary caution. Doubts arose because her appearance did not match previous rumors, raising new questions. The gazes continued to follow them, filling the space with tense curiosity and quiet gossip. And only the truth about her origin remained unchanged, hidden behind a renewed appearance and cold radiance. The memory surfaced with painful clarity. Natalie had long hidden behind someone else's image, hoping to earn love through imitation. But now she accepted herself, and the former hatred of her own hair was replaced by a quiet, confident acceptance. Roger addressed her with restraint, and his voice sounded with hidden interest, behind which one could guess wariness. He asked her directly about her purpose, and in this question, there was a sense of an attempt to understand her intentions. The lady thought for a moment, not daring to say anything. Natalie addressed him softly, and a hidden determination to move on to a more frank conversation appeared in her gaze. She expressed her desire directly, and there was an insistent, but almost gentle request for honesty in her voice. Roger caught the gist of it instantly, and his calm demeanor gleamed with satisfaction at having hit his weak spot precisely. He allowed her to continue, realizing that her words concerned his condition and hidden difficulties. Natalie insisted, and in her address, one could already sense a subtle but persistent attempt to get closer. She almost asked to stay, and in this gesture, a rare sincerity emerged, not characteristic of her previous behavior. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of others, and a slight tension hung in the air. New faces intervened curiously, and their words sounded interested in Roger's unexpected companion. The situation quickly changed, and the conversation took on a lighter, but more cautious tone. Natalie stood aside, her thoughts flickering as she quietly watched Roger act around others. Natalie noticed with a soft smile that the knights seemed to have come to greet the Duke. Then she calmly invited them to continue, deciding to wait on the sidelines, maintaining an outward ease and inner observation. Roger briefly agreed and promised to return, maintaining his usual restraint and control. Natalie said goodbye calmly, allowing him to leave, and her gesture conveyed a slight confidence in how things would unfold. Left alone, she mentally marked her next target, directing her attention to the new important participant in the game. Legends said that the god of life favored the Luxor Empire, protecting it and granting it prosperity. He protected the lands he considered precious, and his blessing became the foundation of their strength. This power was passed on to the heirs, being assigned to the first prince as the highest manifestation of divine will. Natalie remembered this, realizing that the crown prince was now in the center of the hall, and she resolutely walked towards him, leaving no doubt about her intention. Natalie, crossing her arms, with cold calm, acknowledges him as a truly outstanding person, hiding a slight tension behind this attention. The prince bows with gallant gentleness, expressing his readiness to dance, enveloping the moment in radiant attention. The lady next to her notices her blush with alarm, worried about the sudden change. She looks away shyly, assuring herself and others that everything is fine, hiding her excitement. The prince touches her with gentle insistence, his concern sounding almost dangerously close. Natalie coldly notes his art of seduction, seeing in him a flirtatious air. But her gaze trembles for a moment, revealing a shadow of unexpected inner turmoil. A moment later, a young man approached her and angrily declared that even a prince had a limit to his arrogance, beyond which true contempt began. He, without holding back his anger, sharply declared that the prince had nothing but a handsome face and an empty, meaningless title. Then, unable to contain his outburst of anger, the young man splashed wine on the prince and furiously demanded an answer as to how he dared to touch his bride. Natalie intervened in their squabble and calmly noted the excessive aggression of what was happening, and then, with a slight smile, added that it seemed like they had already missed her. He makes excuses and says that he didn't mean to hurt her and is ready to apologize. He asks doubtfully if she is pretending not to recognize him. Natalie replies that it was an inconvenience, and she doesn't blame him. He stops her, calling her name, not wanting to let her go. Memories emerge of how she achieved what she wanted, without hesitation, without even thinking about the consequences of her actions. She recalls how she almost forced someone to sell the jewelry, not knowing that it already belonged to someone else. Now she curiously asks if it was really bought for her, feeling a hidden awkwardness. A cold warning sounds in the shadows. Unnecessary attention will only make the situation worse. Whatever the young man's intentions, he stands in the shadows, hiding his emotions, as the tension from the scene fades around him. There were whispers in the hall, attributing what had happened to Natalie, but he coldly distanced himself from the rumors. Natalie accepts the chaotic attention, with a slight mockery, as if in control of the situation. The prince introduces himself. His name sounds confident and attracts attention. He accepts her appeal calmly, responding with a soft, confident smile. As he draws closer, the prince offers privacy, filling the moment with a warm yet dangerous undertone. The hall is full of admiration for how the prince accepted Natalie, despite rumors of her dangerous reputation, considering it a rare act of kindness. Others, lowering their voices, recall the dark rumors surrounding him, which make getting close to him seem risky and frightening. There is a disturbing idea in the gossip that people around him allegedly lose strength, and this gives the atmosphere a hidden threat. Some dismiss these fears, insisting that Natalie has no abilities and therefore has nothing to fear or lose. The guests watch in amazement as he leaves with her, remembering that he had previously rejected another proposal and was behaving unexpectedly. The young lady, holding back a storm of emotions, followed them with a look full of rage and burning resentment, no longer doubting that the prince would one day have to regret his choice. The prince, maintaining a cool calm, noticed her condition and discreetly offered to take care of her, wanting to replace the damaged dress. Natalie, with a slight equanimity, dismissed the concern, assuring that the damage was almost unnoticeable and not worth any extra attention. He, without hiding his concern, gently questioned whether it was convenient for her to remain in this form. Showing persistent politeness, she replied with quiet confidence and a barely noticeable smile that the night air of the garden would quickly fix everything, maintaining inner peace. The prince takes Natalie to a hidden garden, a rare and forbidden place known only to a select few, emphasizing its silence, beauty, and special value. He gently explains that it is calm and safe here, hoping that this place will bring her comfort after what she has been through. Natalie calmly accepts his gesture, considering it sufficient compensation for what happened, without attaching undue importance to the incident. The prince, with a slight grin, admits that he was prepared for attacks and expected a blow, knowing about the hidden hostility towards him. Natalie is surprised by his frankness. Her gaze becomes more attentive, as if she begins to better understand his situation. He admits that he knew about the enemy's malice and was ready to take the blow, but notes that he did not expect her intervention. Addressing her seriously, the prince reflects on her life and decisions, trying to understand what she is truly looking for. There is a quiet acknowledgement in his voice of the similarity of their fates, hinting at their shared loneliness and the similarity of their situations. The prince sensed the hidden meaning in her actions and became interested in her motives, and Natalie, calmly accepting his insight, noted that it was precisely these qualities that helped him survive amidst intrigue. Despite knowing the crown prince, Natalie felt no closeness to him, as the women around him looked at her with disdain, and she herself felt a strange lack of kinship. Natalie felt that the prince, surrounded by people, actually remained a stranger among them, and his attention to others only increased her inner discomfort. This resemblance to her own loneliness frightened her, because in it she saw a reflection of herself, and this was what worried her most of all. Although many women admired him, no fewer people despised him, and in the end, almost everyone was unhappy with the very fact of his birth. His birth as the illegitimate son of an emperor by a simple servant girl became a shameful stigma that forever darkened the name of Eamon Luxor. In ancient times, the Luxor Empire was considered blessed by the god of life, who granted the heir to the throne supreme power and thus determined his right to rule. Following tradition, the emperor entered into a political marriage with a princess from a neighboring state, hoping that their firstborn would inherit the throne and continue the dynasty. However, even after 10 years, they did not have a child, and soon disturbing rumors began to spread throughout the empire that the god of life had left their land. The girl addresses the emperor with cautious politeness, breaking the silence of the garden, and at that moment, fate imperceptibly begins to change the course of events. The emperor, upon meeting the young servant, is instantly attracted to her, and this sudden feeling develops with frightening force. There was a purity and sincerity in her image, that could touch even someone whose heart had long belonged to duty and power. Soon the impossible happens. She carries his child under her heart, becoming a secret that cannot be hidden. The Empress, cold and unyielding, is not going to tolerate such humiliation and makes a cruel decision. Without even allowing the girl to confess, she is expelled from the palace, deprived of protection and the right to a future next to him. Far from the capital, she gives birth to a son, giving him all her love, despite loneliness and fear. But fate turns out to be merciless. Soon after the birth of the child, she dies, leaving him alone in this world. Abandoned, Aemon wandered the slums until years later, the emperor found him and brought him back to the palace, torn between guilt and duty. Having learned the truth about his origins, the court expected him to receive blessings and power as the true heir. But his illegitimate birth disqualified him from the throne, despite the emperor's blood. The situation was complicated by the fact that the empress already had a son, a legitimate claimant. Aemon lived in anticipation of the awakening of the power, hoping to change his destiny, but was disappointed time after time. The second prince, Paramel, awakened the power earlier, but it turned out to be too weak to secure his power. This gave Aemon a chance, and the emperor increasingly leaned towards him, increasing the latent tension. Paramel's envy was evident, for he knew that without Aemon, he would have become the crown prince. There was bitterness and mockery in his words, hiding the fear of losing everything that he considered rightfully his. Paramel, overcome with envy and malice, mockingly reproached Aemon for losing his strength, hiding behind insolence his fear of his superiority. In his thoughts, he already saw himself as an emperor, dreaming of driving out his rival and regaining his elusive power. Aemon remained powerless but remained calm, while Paramel, despite his status, did not have enough power to rule. Natalie calmly reveals the truth about his lost powers, hinting that they could have been taken away, and there is a certainty in her voice that creates anxiety. The prince, hiding his confusion behind a polite smile, does not fully understand her words, but senses that something dangerous is hidden behind them. She continues, showing awareness of the palace's secrets and its fate, revealing that she knows of hidden experiments and the power of life. With gentle confidence, Natalie hints that she can change his future and lead him to the throne, awakening both hope and doubt in him. The prince, shaken by her words, still demands frankness, trying to understand whether he can trust her or whether this is just a game. He admits to his vulnerability, being considered an inferior heir, and doubting whether he is ever capable of becoming emperor. However, trying to maintain his dignity, he dismisses her guesses, assuring himself that her words could only be a delusion. Natalie coldly notes his insincerity, her gaze piercing, as if she already knows all his secrets and intentions. The prince tenses when she casually reminds him of the abilities he absorbed and that it was far from a harmless act. She ruthlessly reveals the scale of his actions, hinting that it was these very forces that caused the disasters that engulfed the entire empire. The prince hides his concern with a forced smile, pretending not to understand the accusations, but a flicker of worry flickers in his gaze. Natalie coldly recalls the disaster. The fields are dead, the earth is parched, and the whispers of the people connect this with his intervention. She confidently reveals the truth about the power of Flora and his attempt to appropriate it to control the harvest and the fate of the empire. The prince, losing patience, admits the futility of denial and demands silence, suspecting her of spying, clutching his weapon in tense readiness. Natalie calmly hints that her knowledge is like a dream, but there is a confidence in her gaze, as if she sees the truth deeper than reality. The prince becomes wary, his cold mask cracking as her words touch upon something he is used to hiding from everyone. She gently but confidently reveals the essence. Her visions show the path where he rises to the throne, as if his destiny is already predetermined. A picture of the future flashes before them: power, the imperial crown, and other destinies, intertwined in inevitability. The prince doubts, clinging to logic, trying to find a flaw in her words and prove that the future is not so clear-cut. Natalie calmly points out his current weakness. His lack of power and influence makes believing in such a future nearly impossible. She pushes him to make a choice, hinting that inaction could cost him too much if he values his own life. Alarm flashes in his gaze as her words hit the very core of his hidden fears and doubts. Natalie finishes by coldly noting that he understands her better than anyone and therefore cannot ignore what was said. Despite his status, Aemon remains the crown prince only formally, while by blood and law, the right belongs to someone else. It is emphasized that Paramel awakened the power earlier, but Aemon is recognized due to tradition and potential as a bearer of the supreme life force. The Empress claims that Aemon's power is merely an illusion, insisting that true grace has left him. She promotes Paramel as worthy of the throne, but the Emperor remains adamant, rejecting her arguments. As a result, her faction decides to take extreme measures, planning to eliminate Iran in order to change power. Power hangs in the balance. The Emperor is mortally ill, and if Aemon falls before the power awakens, the fate of the throne will be decided without him. The Empress, hiding her triumph, already sees Paramel on the throne because the elimination of his rival will open the way for him to the crown. Meanwhile, Aemon must prove his right by awakening the blessing of life before it is too late. In the present, Natalie extends her hand, hinting that she could be the key to unlocking his power and changing the future. Natalie confidently leads him to a decision, insisting on activating the power, and her calm instills a sense of inevitability in what is happening. She gently assures that everything will change now that she is nearby, and there is a quiet but unshakable confidence in her voice. The prince is amazed by the awakening of the power, but his joy turns to alarm when he notices its instability and the speed with which it is fading. Natalie watches this with a slight smile, as if she knew the outcome in advance, remaining mysteriously calm. She saw her strength fading away. The prince feels doubt and fear, recognizing that his strength is inferior to his brother's, and wondering if his divine gift has deserted him. He quickly dismisses the thought, trying to maintain his composure, but the inner unrest only intensifies. Natalie approaches and confidently touches him, promising to change the outcome and greatly increase his strength, as if she already holds the key to his destiny. A conspiracy is brewing in the shadows. The unknown person believes the prince is blind to the threat and decides to strike while he is carried away by emotions and defenseless. The hooded figure plots murder in cold blood, convinced that the prince must die before the power awakens. An arrow filled with deadly energy is released from the darkness, aimed straight at the target without hesitation. At this moment, the prince and Natalie stand too close, unaware that danger is already overtaking them. The blow breaks the moment. He manages to catch her, protecting her, but tension and fear instantly overwhelm him. Realizing the threat, he quickly realizes that someone else's will is behind it, and blames himself for dragging her into danger. Natalie, despite the chaos, remains calm and confident, as if everything that is happening only confirms her knowledge of the future. Aemon's word was originally different, but a mistake in activation drained his power, and so, clutching his sword and following Natalie's instructions, he obediently repeats after her, trying to make things right. The assassin is confused by the power of life, not understanding why the first prince suddenly displayed abilities he shouldn't have. His body is frozen, roots and branches hold him down, preventing him from moving, and fear begins to take over. The prince is shocked by the disappearance of the threat, and for the first time feels his power truly respond. Natalie calmly consolidates the result, confidently affirming his future, as if she already sees him on the throne. He hesitates, trying to maintain his sanity, not understanding why he should be the emperor. She avoids a direct answer, keeping the secret, but her confidence only draws him deeper into this game of fate. Natalie calmly recalls how she was called poisonous and despised, and the prince was unworthy, and decides to prove everyone wrong. She confidently promises to change other people's opinions, hiding her determination and cold calculation behind a calm appearance. A glint of excitement comes into her eyes as she admits that she intends to deliver a precise and painful response to society. The prince, hiding his interest behind a slight smile, accepts her words as a reasonable and even attractive strategy. A dangerous intimacy develops between them, where behind the softness of their gestures lies a union that can change their destinies. Natalie decides to get closer to the prince, realizing that an alliance with him is the key to her game and influence at court. She gently closes the distance, and he accepts it, allowing her to come closer, sensing a hidden interest. The prince confidently agrees, his gaze warming, his readiness to support her intentions visible in it. Natalie carefully steers the conversation towards his duties and future visits, testing his reaction. He responds calmly and is even happy about the prospect, seeing this as a reason to continue their meetings. She remarks with a touch of irony that their closeness could spark rumors, while remaining outwardly unperturbed. The prince, without hiding his attraction, strives to continue communication, getting even closer to her. After the fight, the attackers are defeated, and the prince coldly notes that retribution for them will be cruel and inevitable. His gaze grows cold. There is no doubt in it. The fate of the enemies has already been decided, and there will be no mercy for them. Turning to Natalie, he gently touches her face, hiding the anxiety behind her with an outward calm. He vows to protect her and never let anyone harm her again. Natalie accepts this with a quiet smile, her anticipation only growing because the game is just beginning. The question of army reform comes up in the council chamber, but his thoughts drift away, filled with fatigue and hidden tension. Roger watches the proceedings with detachment, realizing that only Natalie's presence helped him endure this evening. Roger holds back his power, knowing that losing control would destroy everything. Roger's thoughts turn to the throne and the fear of shame before the Emperor. Roger realizes that a mistake would mean treason and immediate execution. A young man bursts in with alarming news of a barrier breach, his voice full of haste and fear. The advisor reacts sharply, realizing that someone has activated the power and the situation is getting out of control. He reports the explosion in the garden and the fallen attackers, his words tense. Roger's face darkens, instantly connecting the incident with the Crown Prince and Lady Natalie. A sudden incident is announced in the throne room, and tension instantly grips those present, foreshadowing serious consequences. The Emperor is informed of the enemies found in the garden, and he coldly notes the traces of a foreign state. His gaze darkens as he worries about how the enemies managed to penetrate into the very heart of the palace. The guilty bow down, expecting punishment, realizing the failure of their defense and the proximity of punishment. The Emperor restrains his anger, showing visible mercy, but demands that they immediately find out who allowed this to happen. The young man tells the Emperor important news. The Crown Prince was in the garden a long time ago, found himself at the epicenter of the attack, but miraculously remained unharmed. The red-haired prince, with a cold smile, hints that what happened looks too suspicious. The crowd confirms that the Crown Prince left the hall shortly before the explosion, adding to doubts. They remember that Natalie was injured during the attack, while he remained unharmed. The heir himself calmly admits that Natalie might even suspect him of espionage. The red-haired prince presses with words, forcing you to admit the obvious in his eyes. The Emperor thought darkly, feeling the growing tension and hidden threat, and he felt ill. The servant approaches the weakened Emperor with concern, noticing his condition and worrying about his health. The Emperor, hiding his fatigue, orders the attackers to be punished, demonstrating his severity and control over the situation. Natalie watches him and understands that behind his cold behavior lies concern for his father. She gently reassures those around her that she is okay, trying not to escalate the tension. The prince expresses sympathy with restraint and takes on the role of protector, hiding behind this calculation. He approaches, creating a personal atmosphere, promising to talk alone soon and strengthen their connection. At that very moment, Natalie was at a loss, feeling someone's hand suddenly grab her and pull her away from the prince, breaking the fragile moment of intimacy. Roger coldly pushes Natalie aside, asserting his rights, and thereby destroys the tense intimacy that has developed between her and the prince. Natalie awkwardly makes excuses, hiding her confusion, realizing that she is faced with unexpected intervention and someone else's will. The prince reproaches Roger with a cold smile, hinting at his lack of manners and defending the lady's honor. His tone becomes sarcastic, emphasizing the inadmissibility of leaving the lady alone, revealing hidden irritation. Roger responds with restraint, but with a clear threat, recalling the recent danger and questioning the prince's behavior. The tension between them mounts, their gazes clash, and Natalie finds herself caught between two forces poised for open conflict. The prince mockingly notes the closeness between them, hiding behind his lightness the obvious irritation and nascent rivalry. Roger confidently keeps Natalie close, demonstrating his importance and emphasizing that their connection is not accidental. The prince, without hiding his interest, accepts the challenge, recognizing his unexpected opponent and not wanting to give in. However, he steps back, maintaining his dignity, allowing Roger to remain by Natalie's side during this tense moment. As he leaves, he hints with a smile at a future meeting, leaving behind a feeling of an unfinished confrontation. Natalie watches this, realizing that a hidden rivalry has already flared up between the men. Natalie becomes wary, realizing the danger of getting closer, and begins to think about how to avoid a clash between them. A disturbing outcome emerges in her mind, where male rivalry could escalate into a destructive conflict with dire consequences. Roger, not letting her get lost in thought, gently but confidently, returns her attention to himself, once again reducing the distance between them. Natalie gently reassures Roger, hiding the awkwardness and trying to ease the tension between them. Roger, while remaining serious, shows concern and closely monitors her condition, not missing a single detail. He coldly notes that too much has happened in his absence, adding to the sense of lurking threat. Natalie explains what happened, justifying others and smoothing over the conflict, trying to maintain balance. Roger, not quite believing it, hands her a handkerchief, hiding an unexpected softness in this gesture. She accepts him, noticing a warm side to him that had previously remained hidden. He freezes at her touch, not understanding his own feelings and sudden closeness. Natalie, smiling shyly, explains her behavior, trying to hide her confusion. Confusion appears in his gaze, because her actions awaken unusual emotions and interest in him. Natalie realizes with a slight smile that what is happening is just part of the game, but her calm is suddenly broken by someone's abrupt intervention. Anatole appears with cold force, taking over the situation and demanding that the touching stop, his presence instantly thickening the atmosphere. He pulls Natalie close, protectively, and a tense intimacy develops between them, filled with hidden feelings. Anatole discreetly reproaches Roger, hinting at his absence and what Natalie had to endure without him. Natalie, sensing the changes, wonders about Anatole's past, noticing how his behavior changes. A sense of relief dawns in her mind as the distance between her and Roger begins to grow, reducing the dangerous attachment. Anatole, irritated, demands to be ignored as before, revealing hidden resentment and conflicting feelings. Natalie responds coldly, questioning his right to speak like that, destroying his confidence. She calmly reveals the truth, pointing out that he himself was absorbed in another woman and did not think about her. Natalie reproaches him with cold clarity, feeling awkward about his late accusations and hiding her disappointment. Anatole is at a loss under her words, not expecting such a sharp answer and trying to understand her change. Roger intervenes, trying to stop the escalating tension and takes the blame, protecting her. He gently suggests that she stop making accusations, closing the distance and keeping her close. Natalie, noticing the looks of those around her, restrains her emotions and acknowledges her harshness, returning to her outward calm. Natalie, tired of the tension, decides to leave the evening and asks to see her off, trying to maintain her dignity. Anatole reports her father's concerns, hinting at the consequences of what happened and increasing the anxiety. Hearing this, Natalie is surprised and confused, realizing that the situation is getting out of control. Irritation appears in her thoughts at the changes in his behavior and the hidden tension. She tries to free herself, feeling pain from his grip, and insistently asks him to let her go. Having gathered herself, Natalie politely says goodbye, hiding her inner worries and ending the conversation on an outwardly calm note. He makes discreet promises to change, hiding his coldness behind politeness and inner tension. She leaves with a soft smile, leaving behind the anticipation of a new meeting and a subtle play of feelings. Stopping calmly, Anatole decides to intervene, feeling the need to break the polite silence and warn of the hidden threat. His words sound like a veiled warning to sever the connection. Otherwise, past tragedies could repeat themselves. He calmly recalls the long-ago tragedy that he himself was behind, his voice heavy with memories. By raising the shadow of rumors, he hints at the dark secrets of the family, casting a glance into the past. He emphasizes that the survivor knows the truth better than anyone, as if placing hidden responsibility. At the end, there is a quiet but firm request to not allow the same fate to happen again. Roger notes the immutability of his interlocutor with a slight smile, hiding behind it a subtle superiority and cold confidence. The memory of the past comes to mind, where the young duke was closely connected with the lady, and this affection still resonates in the present. Anatole gently but persistently stops her, striving for conversation and clarification of the accumulated tension. Natalie pulls away coldly, her gaze full of weariness and determination not to return to the past. Anatole, holding back his irritation, reproaches her for immaturity and selfishness, not hiding the growing internal conflict. She flares up, no longer holding back her emotions, accusing him of constant cruelty and injustice, where every step she takes is followed by anger, reproaches, and punishments, and in return, he still demands warmth and obedience from her. Anatole flares up, unable to bear it, sharply rejecting her reproaches and defending his father's honor. The Duke coldly intervenes, demanding that the scandal be stopped and reminding him of his duty to his family. There's a tired, irritated look in his eyes. This kind of behavior has become too common. The young man, suppressing his pride, apologizes with difficulty, feeling the gravity of the situation. The Duke cuts off the conversation, postponing the proceedings and leaving the tension hanging in the air. He gives a short order to Natalie, bringing everything back under his strict control. She tries to stay with gentle hope, striving to maintain the fragile balance between her loved ones. But her father harshly interrupts her, demanding obedience and leaving her without a choice before the inevitable conversation. The emperor, exhausted by illness and the weight of power, can barely contain his pain, but even in this state he maintains a commanding presence and an unyielding will. The emperor, overcoming his weakness, informs Eamon that the frozen tree in the garden has suddenly come to life again, hinting at changes. The emperor continues weakly, returning to the past, where the key to what is happening is still kept. His memories bring back the image of Eamon's mother and the quiet days under the tree, filled with light and loss. The emperor, sensing Eamon's weakness, touches him carefully and wonders about the throne, but he himself admits that the real problem is Paramel, which is long overdue to be dealt with. Eamon hides the tension behind a slight grin, trying to remain calm. Paramel, observing, hints at the emperor's growing interest, reading between the lines. He asks the question with cold irony, as if suspecting a carefully planned game behind everything. Eamon parries the hint with a slight grin, not wanting to reveal his cards and maintaining a cool dignity. Paramel, with a sarcastic play on words, turns the conversation to Natalie, doubting her sincerity. Eamon calmly reprimands him, reminding him of manners and boundaries. Paramel responds with mockery, emphasizing his importance and experience, hiding a sarcasm behind it. He continues the provocation, contrasting himself with his brother and hinting at his uselessness. Eamon, without turning around, coldly makes it clear that everything has long been known, and there is no point in pretending. He reveals Natalie's true nickname, as if throwing down a challenge and testing her reaction. Paramel is struck by a guess, suddenly realizing the girl's hidden identity. Eamon ends the conversation, walking away with a touch of casualness and leaving a feeling of tension behind. Paramel remains irritated, hiding behind his coldness, obvious hostility, and hurt pride. Natalie unwittingly reveals her secret, remembering how long she hid behind an image, but now her true light can no longer be hidden. Paramel notices Eamon's interest and, playing with feelings, decides to intervene, intending to break their rapprochement. There is a cold determination in his thoughts. In this family, there is no place for desires. No one is allowed to have what they want. Natalie clenches her hands, hiding her confusion. Confidence is crumbling, anxiety is growing, and control is slipping away, leaving her defenseless against her own feelings. His gaze is cold, but there is a flicker of alarm in it. Natalie is once again drawn into danger, as if she herself attracts troubles. The Duke tries to hide his concern by checking on her condition, but the tension betrays his inner struggle. Natalie looks away, hiding her embarrassment and strange warmth. For the first time, she is touched by someone else's concern. She turns away, as if running away from her feelings, decisively renouncing her past image. Behind the soft smile lies fatigue. Her choice sounds calm, but inside there remains doubt. His words hurt with a shadow of the past, hinting at a similarity she is not ready to accept. Alarm flashes in her gaze, memory and emotion intertwining, revealing a weakness she was afraid to admit. Anxiety creeps through Natalie's mind. Sharon's absence is alarming, heightening the fragile feeling of instability. His calm is only superficial. Behind his cold gaze lies hidden fatigue and tense restraint. The memory flashes sharply, Sharon falling in the center of the room, like a harbinger of impending troubles. Natalie is lost in contradictions, sensing the strangeness of what is happening and hidden motives around her. The Duke closes his eyes wearily. Endless conflicts have exhausted him, leaving only an irritated coldness. The pressure becomes almost palpable. Duty, fear, and the hidden efforts of others hang over the situation. Natalie lowers her gaze, suppressing her emotions, and resignedly accepting the inevitable, although doubt still seethes inside. His cold appearance chills the air. His father's presence weighs more heavily than words, creating an uneasy tension in his soul. Natalie hides her fear behind a slight smile, preferring other people's anger to silent condemnation, which is much more pressing. The news about Sharon falls heavily. Her condition is serious, and the atmosphere thickens with anxious anticipation. The Duke's gaze finds Natalie, and in that moment, there is power, control, and an undeniable decision from which there is no escape. She freezes, not expecting to become the center of attention, feeling the situation slipping out of her hands. Natalie tries to hold on, but irritation breaks through. The weakness of the body only intensifies the internal breakdown. The doctor speaks softly, but their words sound like a death sentence. Her condition requires rest, which she is not given. She flares up, not wanting to be helpless, but the truth remains the same. Her strength is leaving her. The maids continue to care for her, turning her life into a quiet confinement under the guise of treatment. Time drags on painfully slowly. After the ball, her world narrows to a room where freedom has become an unattainable dream. Natalie, bowing her head, gradually realizes the truth. Behind the imaginary care lies control, and anxiety is replaced by bitter understanding. Clarity breaks through her tired smile. Her freedom is being restricted not out of fear for her, but for the sake of other people's goals. Anatole can hardly contain his irritation, throwing a silent reproach at the Duke. He no longer has the strength to watch other people's suffering. His patience is running out. The Duke coldly justifies the cruelty, convinced that everything is done for the sake of the children. He sacrifices feelings without hesitation, considering it a necessary price. There is a reminder in his voice that the goal is more important than the pain. But Anatole's doubts were creeping in, and he wondered if there was any point if the children were suffering. The Duke does not give in, demanding explanations and submission. His response is an icy warning about his son's past mistake, as his greed almost led to his sister's deaths. The Duke remains cold and unwavering, hiding behind his outward calm a rigid confidence in his decisions. In his hands is the past, frozen in an image where feelings are intertwined with duty. He believes that he has fulfilled his promise, but behind this lies something more than just care. Other people's doubts begin to sound louder. Was this a calculation from the very beginning? In the shadows, uncertainty arises, as does the fear of making mistakes and losing control of the situation. Thoughts are confused, leaving only the disturbing question, what to do next if everything went wrong? Abandoned and forgotten, she feels betrayed by those close to her, and loneliness slowly eats away at her heart. Exhausted by her confinement, she understands that she is being held not out of care, but by someone else's will. Meanwhile, the fates of others become intertwined, and her anxiety for them only intensifies her bitter epiphany. In captivity, she realizes that she is deprived of meetings and freedom, but the pain is softened by a rare hope. The thought of separation hurts less than the humiliating feeling of one's own helplessness. Requests go unanswered, and the servants' cold excuses sound like memorized lies. A quiet certainty is growing in her heart. It's not that she's busy, she's just being deliberately kept away. Natalie understands that her loved ones haven't forgotten her. They've simply chosen someone else, and this knowledge cuts deeper than loneliness. The truth emerges coldly. It was pushed aside so as not to interfere, like an extra piece in someone else's game. Childhood memories come alive, revealing how long she lived trying to earn love. In her doubts, she blames herself, wavering between pain and the usual desire to justify herself. Determination matures slowly. Now she herself chooses with whom to go further and does not look back. Awareness of the past is linked to the present, where other people's conflicts only strengthen her insight. She recalls the anxious moment when she linked someone else's mood with their guilt, but comes to a quiet relief. Her suspicions turned out to be wrong. Natalie understands that fate is leading her to an inevitable meeting with the one who will become the key to the whole story. The awareness of the main figure is disturbing, as if foreshadowing a dangerous and fateful game. At the academy, she is greeted coldly, her path reduced to dry tasks and rules. Immersing herself in books, she tries to follow the plan, but the internal tension only grows. Having discovered inconsistencies, she feels her trust in the imposed truth crumble. Natalie notices the discrepancy and carefully points out the error, waiting for a reasonable answer. Instead, he encounters a cold indifference, where the truth doesn't matter to anyone. Someone else's mockery only highlights the gap between her thoughts and her surroundings. She decides not to argue, hiding her doubts and hurrying to complete the imposed work. Outer calm returns, but inside there remains a quiet distrust of what is happening. Natalie notices the emptiness around her and decides to take advantage of the opportunity, hiding her anxiety under a fragile determination to meet Roger. On the street, calm overwhelms her for a moment, but inside doubt grows. Everything is too suspicious and quiet. Anxiety creeps into her thoughts. What is happening seems not accidental, as if she is being deliberately kept in the dark. Meanwhile, at the table, they are coldly discussing her, accusing her of deception and questioning her sincerity. Others support this by talking about punishment and rules, where the truth no longer matters. Having realized this, she is left alone with her pain, realizing that she has become superfluous and a stranger among those she trusted. A scene emerges in her memories, where she is accused of someone else's pain, hinting at her involvement in what happened. She is at a loss, feeling the weight of guilt, and tries to understand whether she really caused the suffering. In response, they coldly make it clear to her that the truth is more complex, and she will have to sort out the confusing truth herself. The lady was taken aback, as she did not expect to see Natalie. Natalie denies the accusations with cold curiosity, not seeing her guilt in what happened. In response, they try to impose responsibility on her, reproaching her for the fact that someone else's suffering was a consequence of her actions. She remains steadfast, accepting what she hears without emotion, and making it clear that she has no intention of repenting. Natalie, with cold confidence, refutes the accusations, demonstrating their absurdity. Neither the events nor other people's decisions are connected to her, and she has no intention of taking on someone else's guilt. Natalie understands that such conversations are part of a familiar game, where feelings are made a mockery of. The girl mockingly denies sincerity, assuring that her interest in the prince is just an illusion and a whim. The man supports her, calling him a puppet, and emphasizing that everything has been calculated long ago. Observing this, Natalie realizes that behind the external glitter, there are hidden gossip, cold calculation, and cruel rules. The girl easily admits her kindness, without hiding her mockery and hidden resentment. A sudden blow cuts off her words, turning confidence into shock and fear. Natalie coldly reveals the truth, showing how easily someone else's care could turn into harm. The lady tries to justify herself, but her words sound increasingly weak under the pressure of the facts. Natalie warns mercilessly, making it clear that slander will be punished. She remains calm, as if in control of everything that is happening and the emotions of others. The rest, in fear, realize that behind the soft exterior lies a frightening cruelty. Natalie wearily reflects on her duty, but is confronted with mocking interest from the young man. Parme appears in her path, and he gently provokes her, noting her harshness and hidden tension after recent events. His tone becomes playful, turning into outright flirtation and admiration for her character. He allows himself to be bold, breaking boundaries, testing her reaction and patience. Natalie responds with restraint, accepting the game, but not allowing herself to be completely drawn in. The young man compares himself to his brother, trying to arouse her interest and assert his superiority. She coldly cuts off the attempt, making it clear that his words mean nothing to her. Natalie remembers with cold resentment how he gave her a humiliating nickname, starting a wave of ridicule, and now his attempts at flirtation seem hypocritical and empty to her. Paramal, with a slight grin, reduces everything to a simple misunderstanding, as if someone else's pain is just a trifle, and tries to close the topic without accepting guilt. She reveals the past, where his actions robbed her of her freedom and future, but asserts her strength and independence. Natalie coldly stated that their intrigues had robbed her of her chance at marriage, but she would accept loneliness and no longer submit to their will. Paramal tried to downplay what was said, hiding his awkwardness behind a slight smile and feigned indifference. Natalie coldly exposes his motives, seeing in him only a thirst for profit and power. His calm cracks, irritation breaks through, and he loses his composure. The conflict reaches its peak when it almost breaks down, crossing the line of what is permissible. Amon's appearance stops him, turning the situation into a threat to Paramel. Amon harshly rebukes him, putting him in his place and reminding him of the boundaries he has crossed. He chuckled coldly, questioning her position, but his gaze showed irritation and wounded pride. Natalie calmly deflected the threat, as if defending not herself but someone else's honor, and this only hurt him more. With a slight smile, she reserved the last word for herself, warning that something like this would not be forgotten. In the silence, he seethed with humiliation, and the dark determination to pay back was slowly crowding out his mind. The prince calmly returns the conversation to the previous topic, as if nothing had been missed. Amon carefully clarifies whether his proximity truly gives her the ability to use the life force. Natalie calmly explains that this requires physical contact, even a simple gesture like holding hands. In her thoughts, he suddenly seems even more innocent than before, as if she were seeing a different, altered version of him. Amon thanks her discreetly, acknowledging that with her help, he was able to present the gift to the emperor, and has never ceased to admire her since. He asks directly what benefit she is seeking by helping him, hinting at her situation and offering a safer choice. Natalie is forthright in stating that they both lack something that a title alone cannot provide, and that is precisely what she is striving to obtain. He tries to understand what exactly they lack and receives a quiet answer: freedom. She approaches softly, breaking the distance, and the word fills with warmth between them. She explains that they are constantly compared and judged, deprived of their own essence. She admits that she wants to break free from these comparisons and become herself. He is overcome with confusion as her touch erases familiar boundaries. She asks with a slight smile if he would like the same. Eamon understands the meaning of freedom for the first time, realizing that he had never even thought about it before. She explains that his freedom is to learn to do without her, but still remains by his side until this day. He is overcome with anxiety at the thought of her disappearance, as if everything might suddenly end. She notices his pain hidden behind his restraint. With a soft smile, she dismisses the thought, assuring him that she won't leave so easily. At that very moment, a quiet relief was born within him, and he suddenly pulled her towards him, causing her to be confused by surprise. Eamon admits he hoped to keep Natalie close, and there's a quiet affection there. His confidence grows, and Eamon, with gentle insistence, seeks her consent to stay. Natalie notices how his feeling begins to change, slowly gaining strength. Eamon, without letting go of Natalie, makes it clear that she is the most important thing to him now. With a slight smile, Eamon suggests a step forward, a meeting with those who once nearly took their lives. Natalie notes that thanks to Eamon, she was even able to see the underground prison. She warns that this is a dangerous place, where you can only leave feet first. Eamon remarks with a slight mockery that he wouldn't even mind being there with Natalie. Natalie reacts with restraint, her silence betraying the underlying tension. Eamon explains that assassins are already targeting them, and their route to the palace remains uncertain. Eamon recalls surviving numerous assassination attempts and comes to a grim conclusion. He reveals that the Empress will not stop even at murder if it concerns his fate. He notes that this time Natalie was also drawn into her intrigues, despite her position. Eamon reasons that the Isayan family is unlikely to support Natalie, and the consequences could be severe. He admits it all sounds absurd, but suspects that Glior's mercenaries are targeting her as well. He emphasizes that Natalie's sudden acquisition of the gift of ghostly visions shocked the entire country and could not go unnoticed. Natalie concludes that such information should be hidden, since its elimination would seem the most logical step. Natalie agrees with his words and asserts that she believes in his right to choose his own destiny, but a cruel picture unfolds before them. Wounded bodies lie behind bars, like a reminder of the cost of mistakes. Natalie notices the scarlet hair and realizes who is in front of her, realizing the gravity of what she saw. Eamon cautiously admits it's difficult to watch, but he doesn't look away. He explains that the young man was already mortally wounded when he was found, never having regained consciousness. Natalie bitterly realizes that here death comes before the sentence, and this place leaves no hope. Through the scarlet whirlwind of fate, the thought of meeting the one who was to become the main ending of this story is revealed. Eamon notes that the second survivor is in better condition, but needs to be kept under surveillance due to the Empress's machinations. He notices the coat of arms on his hand, a sign of recognition by the Emperor Glior himself. Natalie realizes that the presence of such a person here is associated with a direct threat to their lives. Eamon concludes that they either want to eliminate them or make sure of their death. The story takes us to the roots of the war, where the greed and ambitions of the kingdoms fueled the endless conflict. The deep roots of hostility between Luxor and the Empire only increased the destructive power of the confrontation. Despite the power of Glior, defeating Luxor, protected by Providence, proved almost impossible. It is said that despite the power of Glior, it turned out to be extremely difficult to defeat Luxor, blessed by Providence. It was at the moment when Luxor was close to victory that the tide of the long war began to turn. A turning point occurs. Gifted people appear in Gliora, changing the balance of power. Although they were fewer in number, their nature was different from the blessed ones of Luxor. Their strength came not from the gods, but from themselves, freed from the fear of punishment. These people used their abilities freely, breaking old rules and instilling fear. Their arrival shook Luxor, sowing chaos and unrest throughout the empire. The ruler of Gliora turns their power into wealth and authority, subjugating every gift to himself. Natalie anxiously wonders why a man from Gliora, with special abilities, found himself on the brink of death, and a dark image of Igor, balancing between life and death, appears before her. She realizes that, whatever the reason, she needs him as a key figure. The thought of his role in this story makes her tremble internally. Understanding comes cold and clear. His death will destroy the very possibility of survival in this world. Natalie realizes that even if the world is just a game, the pain in it becomes frighteningly real. The memory of suffering gives rise to a protest in her. No one should have to experience such a thing. Before her mind's eye, she sees Roger, connected to the power and secrets of this world. Then Eamon appears, surrounded by power, but hiding his own ties. And finally, Igor is the key to the denouement, on which everything depends. Natalie makes a decision. not just to break out of the system, but to give each of them a chance for a happy and safe life. Eamon notices Natalie's condition with concern, and, with gentle concern, suggests that they leave this place. He apologizes, feeling guilty for bringing her here. Natalie assures him that she is fine, not wanting to show weakness. She gathers her courage and turns to him with a serious, almost desperate request. Her gaze hardens as she asks him to trust her with this man. There is a hidden obsession in her words. She wants his destiny to belong only to her, no matter what. Eamon admits that he doesn't fully understand her motives, but still trusts her decision. He gives in, allowing her to act, accepting her will without further questions. Natalie thanks him for his trust, maintaining an outward calm. She explains that the young man's fate has already been decided for everyone else, and his disappearance will not arouse suspicion. Touching him, Natalie feels how the life almost left his body. She is overcome with anxiety as she realizes how close he is to death. Yet she decides to act, despite the certainty that saving him is almost impossible. Eamon coldly remarks that he would rather see the man dead, not wanting to take any risks. He reminds Natalie that he tried to kill her, and his life could become a new threat. Natalie calmly accepts his doubts and offers to reveal the true reason for his decision. She admits that she saw him in a dream and knows that he will still play an important role. Eamon, with a slight grin, understands that they no longer have a choice and can only move forward. Natalie softens and reveals her true feelings. She simply doesn't want him to get hurt. Eamon quietly notes that even her power can only delay the inevitable for a short time. He understands that they only have a few minutes, after which everything will depend only on him. The servant anxiously finds Natalie and informs her that everything has already ended and her absence was a cause for concern. He gently reproaches her, hinting at possible troubles. Natalie brushes it off easily, explaining it away as a simple walk, as if nothing serious had happened. Eamon's order to limit her spending. Natalie rejects this with irony, not wanting to submit to such restrictions. People start whispering around her, realizing that her spending could attract the attention of the entire capital. The servants carry the heavy purchases with difficulty, not hiding their surprise. Natalie strictly orders them to be careful, not allowing their purchases to be damaged. Natalie, with a hint of determination, declares that she will take on all the shopping, from dresses to jewelry, but she singles out one box among everything, realizing that it could attract unnecessary attention. Anatole admits with cold caution that he had a premonition that something was wrong when she decided to go to the meeting. There is a pressure in his gaze, demanding an answer about her true intentions. Natalie remains calm and greets him politely, hiding the tension. She easily changes the subject, as if playfully, drawing attention to the dress and diverting the meaning. Anatole remarks with a cold smile that she has never outgrown her desire to imitate Sharon. He presses her with words, reproaching Natalie for continuing to attract unwanted attention from the family. Natalie replies with cold directness that he never paid attention to her, destroying his reproach. A confession comes to mind. As a child, she really did seek love through mistakes. She remembers how she deliberately got into trouble, just to be noticed by her father and brother. But as she grew older, even that stopped working, leaving her alone and isolated. Anatole changes the subject, accusing her of a new scandal with her friend Sharon. His irritation grows as he reproaches her for her constant problems. Natalie demanded that he stop, but Anatole continued to quarrel with her. Anatole exploded in rage, rudely pushing boundaries and not hiding his rage. Natalie couldn't take it anymore and hit him. He looks at Natalie with contempt, considering her behavior madness and utter insolence. The Duke intervenes, coldly interrupting their quarrel and demanding that they stop immediately. He reproaches them in a restrained but harsh manner, comparing their behavior to a childish quarrel. Anatole coldly declares that Natalie has gone too far in demanding her father's permission to punish her. Natalie instantly flares up, sharply rejecting his right to control her. The Duke cuts him off abruptly, not allowing the situation to reach its limits. His words sound indifferent. He has long since stopped expecting changes from her. He makes it clear that her behavior doesn't matter to him, as long as it doesn't involve men. In the end, he makes a cold judgment, to marry Natalie to a member of a noble family. The Duke coldly decides her fate, declaring that she should simply be married to a noble man. He adds indifferently that it will be up to her husband to decide what to do with her. For him, this is the only reason why Natalie remains in this house at all. Anatole restrainedly apologizes for the scandal he caused, trying to regain control of the situation. The Duke coldly inquired about Sharon's condition, as if switching to something more important. Having learned that she has gotten better, He accepts it without unnecessary emotions. Anatole promised to be more careful, hiding his inner tension. The Duke indifferently notes that he does not blame him, justifying what is happening. He advises him to rest, hinting at the need to recover. In the end, he leaves him time to look after Sharon and take care of himself. Anatole accepts his father's words with restraint, suppressing his emotions and hiding his inner tension. The memory gently takes me back to a time when her name sounded different, with warmth and closeness. The past, where everything seemed simpler and more sincere, comes before my eyes. Little Natalie is looking for attention, and even then I reach out to him, knowing no bounds. His calm voice was still trying to keep her from making mistakes. Now comes the realization that after that incident, everything has changed irrevocably, and the bitter thought takes hold. She has gone too far, from where there is no easy way back. Anatole recalls with cold irony that after that incident, there was not a single day of peace in the house. His memory flashes back to his father's decision to marry Natalie off without hesitation, as if it were the only way out. He admits that what happened seemed excessively cruel, but is in no hurry to dispute this. He only distantly suggests finding a doctor, without delving deeper into her condition. The servant feels indignantly used, not understanding why he was dragged into this. Entering the room, he froze in place as Natalie desperately begged him to save the dying man, ignoring all doubts and risks. The servant is at a loss, not understanding who this man is and why so much effort is being made for him. But in the end, he is presented with a fait accompli. As a doctor, he has no right to refuse. Natalie reminds us with a pleading voice that a doctor is obliged to save a person if he or she needs help. She is ready to pay any price just to get his consent. In desperation, she holds out the jewelry as a last hope to convince him. Hearing a refusal, she loses confidence and almost begs, not knowing how else to get through to him. Her voice breaks as she asks for only one thing: to save him. The doctor calmly rejects the money, reminding him of his debt. He takes on the treatment, accepting responsibility without hesitation. And yet he admits that the very fact that the young man is still alive already borders on a miracle. The doctor gloomily states that the young man is unconscious and his condition is critically close to death. He explains that even if he has breathing and a pulse, it is almost impossible to save him. Natalie, holding back her anxiety, searches for even the slightest hope of salvation. The doctor admits that there is a chance, but it is extremely slim. He names only one condition, a rare remedy, without which it is impossible to cure him. Natalie suddenly remembers the legendary herb cam, a miracle that can restore fading life. A desperate hope flares up in her soul, displacing fear and confusion. The knowledge that this might be enough to save him fills her with an anxious determination. Without any further hesitation, she seizes this chance as if it were the last thread of fate. Natalie's hope is dashed when she hears that the life-saving miracle cannot be used. Alarm flashes in her eyes, desperately searching for even the slightest way out. Thoughts cling to money as a last resort, but the heart already senses a catch. Reality coldly cuts off hope, leaving only confusion and fear. The realization of the inevitable washes over her, plunging her into silent despair. Natalie clings to her last hope in disbelief, unable to believe that the life-saving cure is no longer available. The bitter truth is revealed to her. Even in the past, this rare miracle was almost unattainable, appearing only in select places and valued at an exorbitant price. Natalie freezes when it becomes clear that the disappearance of hope did not begin now, but long before. She is revealed a terrifying truth: an unknown force has begun methodically destroying the Kayam herb throughout the world. Even in her native lands, where the last shoots of a miracle once hid, nothing remained of it but emptiness. Natalie learns that the disappearance of the grass was so serious that even the Duke was alarmed. He had once personally searched for this miracle, sparing no effort to save it. Memories come flooding back. 2 years ago, Sharon was on the brink, with only a glimmer of hope. But it was then that Chaim's power did the impossible, snatching her from the clutches of death. Now a new thought is born in Natalie's heart. Perhaps the remnants of this miracle are still hidden somewhere nearby. Natalie realizes that Sharon has always remained nearby, not by her own will, but because of her father's fragile health and will. This thought leads her to a sudden epiphany. Perhaps, for the sake of salvation, he hid the last miracle somewhere in this house. The doctor realizes with a heavy heart that his efforts were insufficient in the face of the inevitable. Life is slipping away, and the cold awareness of impending death hangs in the air. Natalie remains close, but hope fades, leaving only a painful silence. The doctor retreats, convincing himself not to interfere in someone else's fate, hiding his anxiety. However, looking at the wounds in the mark, he feels that this story is much more dangerous and deeper than it seems. The doctor clearly understands that if the truth about helping Natalie comes to light, it will result in serious consequences and condemnation for her and her patron. And yet, watching her desperate struggle for someone else's life, he involuntarily becomes imbued with a quiet respect mixed with anxiety. Leaving the hall, he takes with him the weight of this choice, realizing that knowledge does not always provide answers when feelings and destinies are at stake. Natalie, clutching his face with trembling fingers, clings to the slipping life, unable to accept the inevitable. Tears quietly slide down her cheeks as despair fills her heart. She realizes the cruel truth. Even salvation now will only delay the end. His destiny is revealed to her. Born with a terrifying power, he became the one the world feared and rejected. His gift, like an abyss, brought not only power, but also suffering. Every time he went beyond the limits, he paid for the power with his consciousness, as if losing himself piece by piece. For him, the herb came was not just a medicine, but the only circle of salvation in the abyss of his own power. And now, having collected all the fragments of truth, Natalie finally clearly sees the whole cruel picture of what is happening. Natalie realizes with alarm that Igor's condition is a consequence of the disappearance of the life-saving herb. Thoughts are confused, time is slipping away, and the fear of not making it in time squeezes the heart. The huge house seems like an endless labyrinth where hope can hide anywhere. The memory of the mother flashes unexpectedly, bringing a fragile thread of guesswork, and in this insight, a determination is born to search where life was once kept. Natalie can't bear to watch Igor fade away before her eyes, and despair tears her apart from within. The realization hits her like a heavy wave. This whole world is just a game, and her suffering was not in vain. The past comes to mind, where helplessness and loneliness became her only companions. And now, all this pain is intertwined, turning into a determination to no longer allow fate to take away from her the one who has become dear to her. Natalie realizes with a shudder that she has no right to make a mistake again, because the price of previous decisions still weighs on her heart. In the dark silence, despair thickens, but through it breaks the only truth. All the meaning in this world for her is concentrated in Sharon. The thought of Igor's disappearance pierces Natalie with fear. In this world, his loss will go unnoticed. The realization that everything here exists only for Sharon's sake hits her like a heavy truth and destroys her illusions. She understands her helplessness in the face of a plot where the roles are already assigned and there is no place for her. But through despair, a determination is born to go against what is predetermined and save them at any cost. Natalie cuts off the past with quiet determination, no longer allowing herself to be weak and careless. The long journey has hardened her will, and now retreat seems impossible, even in the face of fear. Memories of her mother surface painfully, revealing the reason for her strange attachment to the greenhouse. Before it seemed like just melancholy, but now there is a hidden meaning and a disturbing mystery to it. The knowledge that entry is prohibited there sounds like a deliberate attempt to hide something important. The thought that even her father might have missed something sparks a troubling hope in her. Childhood memories come alive with warmth. Among flowers and light, next to her mother, where the truth could still be hidden, Natalie realizes, with a sinking feeling, that her father might never have learned the whole truth, remaining in ignorance. A realization flashes brightly. Only her mother has kept the secret of this place, ever since the times when everything seemed simple. Despite the cold logic of the game, she feels, behind the image of her mother, there is something more. Natalie realizes with alarm that there is almost no time left and hurries back to Igor, feeling fear driving her. The sunset paints the sky, reminding her of the inexorably approaching limit, after which nothing can be changed. Panic grows in her chest, demanding that she act faster before hope finally fades. Having reached him, she freezes in horror, afraid to see the outcome too late. The awareness of a weak but still living pulse brings fragile relief and a new wave of determination. She clings to him, as if trying to hold on to his life with her own warmth and desperate faith. Gathering her remaining strength, Natalie decides to take a risk, realizing that this is her only chance to save him. Natalie painfully realizes his helplessness. His body is still alive, but unconscious. He slips away from her. Her resolve grows stronger. To save him, she is ready to step over her own boundaries and fear. In despair and trepidation, Natalie leans towards him, allowing her feelings to burst out like the last thread connecting him to life. Through the scarlet glow of memory, the image of Igor emerges, still alive, but lost in an alien and dangerous world. He stared at the bird for a moment as it took its last breaths, but after a moment, he leaned over it. The silence is broken by a fragile moment. An unfamiliar figure appears nearby, like a shadow between light and darkness. His confused look reveals fear and mistrust, because the unknown is opening up before him. The stranger introduces himself as Er, and his soft tone conceals a persistent confidence, as if their meeting was inevitable. He extends his strength, demanding from Igor not just trust, but complete acceptance, as if his very fate depended on it. The space around him is distorted by light and energy, and Igor feels himself being drawn into something incomprehensible and frightening. His gaze is filled with confusion and anxiety because he doesn't understand where he is or what is happening to him. Here comes to in a dim, warm light, not understanding where he is and why everything around him seems alien. His body felt heavy from the strange closeness. Natalie pressed herself against him, as if she were afraid to let go even for a moment. Her gaze is a mixture of anxiety and confusion, because she herself does not fully understand what she has decided to do to save him. Ir feels confused and awkward, trying to understand what is happening and the reasons for their situation. His thoughts become confused when he notices changes in himself. Even his appearance no longer seems the same. Natalie, looking at him, notes this difference with alarm, realizing that the rescue did not pass without a trace. Natalie peers at him, and at first clings to familiar features, as if it were the same Igor in front of her. But the longer she looks, the more alarm grows. Something alien slips into his gaze. Her inner feeling does not allow her to be deceived. In front of her is not the one she desperately tried to save. The absence of familiar emotions shattered her last hope, confirming that something was deeply wrong here. She asked in bewilderment what his name was. Natalie says someone else's name, and the tension in the air thickens, as if the truth is finally coming out. The realization pierces her. In front of her is no longer Igor, but someone else, hidden behind a familiar appearance. She seeks confirmation in his memory, but the answer only brittlely reveals someone else's will and destroys the last doubts. Natalie continues with restraint, but her gaze is already filled with suspicion and tense wariness. The thought suddenly hits her. It's as if there's a completely different person in front of her, hidden under a familiar face. She demands the truth, and his confusion and guilty whispers only confirm her fears. While she tries to grasp for a rational explanation, she still feels that what is happening is much deeper than a simple mistake. Natalie tries to stay calm, convincing herself that the main thing is that he is alive, even though her heart is still gripped with anxiety. Ir hides his pain behind a soft smile, but his eyes tremble with a strange, unfamiliar vulnerability. She reaches out to him with cautious tenderness, as if afraid to upset the fragile balance between them. His touch is unexpectedly warm, and there is a strange, unfamiliar closeness in this gesture. A hint of the past breaks through the gratitude, as if they are connected by something forgotten and unsolved. Natalie freezes, overcome with new excitement, feeling that this meeting is only the beginning of a hidden truth. A dark episode emerges in his memory, where guilt and fear are intertwined with the desire to protect her at any cost. He remembers trying to justify himself, clinging to the idea that she was innocent in the midst of other people's cruelty. But the pressure was stronger. Someone else's order broke the will, forcing one to obey and suppress doubts. And in that darkness, there was a threat, cold and merciless, leaving no choice between life and death. Ir confesses the terrible truth, and behind his calm smile, one can feel the weight of forced submission. Natalie is shocked. The realization of the order destroys her previous understanding of what is happening. The thought that everything was just a game of the powerful painfully changes her view of the past. He speaks easily, but this ease hides fatigue from someone else's will and the role of a pawn. At this moment, the true Igor flares up, and his rage breaks through the alien shell. His voice becomes sharp and cold, as if he no longer intends to tolerate what is happening. Contempt flares in the silence, and her fear gives way to a cold, almost mocking realization that behind the threats and orders, she suddenly sees not an all-powerful puppeteer, but only a pitiful shadow hiding behind someone else's hands. The air grows heavy, and the tension in the room becomes almost palpable, as if reality itself is wavering. In this turning point, he suddenly changes, and a familiar living spark returns to his gaze, as if Igor is awakening again. In an instant, the tension flares into anger, and he grabs her roughly, not hiding his contempt. His words are full of cold arrogance, as if he puts himself above all rules and feelings. Natalie, despite her fear, straightens up and calls herself with dignity, not allowing her will to be broken. Her voice hardens and she demands respect, pushing away his insolence. His gaze changes. Interest appears in it, as if she has unexpectedly violated his expectations. Natalie recalls her actions, and her words sound hidden with resentment and pride. He leans closer, playing with the situation, but now with obvious curiosity about her and her power. His threat flares with a bright flash of power, and the space between them fills with dangerous tension. Natalie does not retreat, meeting his gaze with quiet but unyielding determination. An anxious voice behind the door cuts through the tension, bringing reality back to this dangerous moment. The maid, disturbed by the noise, hesitates on the threshold, not daring to enter without permission. Natalie remains motionless as he leans closer with a dangerous grin, hiding the storm behind a mask of calm. The maid announces her intention to enter decisively, leaving no room for objection, and at that moment he becomes wary, slowly straightening up. Anger flashes in his gaze, concealing a storm and a dangerous, restrained strength. A cold determination flares up in him, and the thought of possible blood sounds almost indifferent, like inevitability. His gaze becomes sharp, a threat flickers in it, as if order is more important to him than other people's lives. She gently but confidently intercepts his impulse, holding the line beyond which he was already ready to step. Her gesture conveys a calm authority and a hidden anxiety that prevents chaos from breaking out. He freezes, tense and dangerous, but under her influence, the storm subsides for a moment. A cold irritation flashes in her gaze as she sharply outlines the boundaries that no one dares to cross. The words sound harsh and distant, as if every extra step of other people's concerns only increases her internal tension. The maid cowers, lost between fear and genuine anxiety, not daring to retreat from her devotion. The lady's response is tinged with icy mistrust, as if someone else's concern seems unnecessary and uninvited to her. Her will becomes unbending. No one has the right to invade her world without permission, and, lowering her gaze, the maid obediently retreats, taking with her the anxiety and the weight of unspoken words. Tension fills the hallway as one of the maids quietly chides another for rushing and disobeying orders. She, trembling, justifies herself with sincere anxiety. In her voice, there is not fear of punishment, but concern for her mistress. The second, crossing her arms, acknowledges the changes in the lady's behavior, noting that there is almost no softness left in her. Their conversation slides towards familiar judgments. The lady's irascibility and the indifference of those around her have already become something ordinary, and, leaving, they leave behind a quiet thought that some people, strangely enough, do not change at all. In the dark silence, the threat thickens, and the thought of invasion turns into a harbinger of bloody retribution. His rage flares up like an inevitable sentence, capable of erasing everything around in one destructive impulse. A desperate determination is born in her heart to stop the approaching storm at any cost. A shadow of bewilderment flickers in Igor's gaze, as if returning to life feels alien and unfamiliar. She clings to her only hope, trying to understand whether the miracle of salvation was the result of a forbidden power. Igor calmly destroys her expectations, acknowledging the disappearance of the grass and hinting that the answer lies elsewhere. Igor, without looking away, calmly says this, carefully watching Natalie, as if trying to catch every shadow of her reaction. Igor notes with a slight grin that Natalie doesn't look like an ordinary aristocrat at all, and confidently calls her by name. Natalie, having pulled herself together, reveals her secret, explaining what is happening through prophetic dreams in which his fate was revealed to her. The image of his fall and death emerges in her memories, increasing the tension between them. She calmly shifts the choice of faith onto him, although inside, she feels the shaky nature of her own explanations. Igor perceives this with mocking interest, not hiding the fact that he expected a much simpler motive for her actions. Natalie, catching the hint, clarifies, linking his words with the figure of the prince, from whom this entire dangerous story begins. Igor, with a cold smile, rejects hints of an alliance, making it clear that he will not become a pawn in someone else's game. There is a note of contempt in his voice, as if the very proposal seems humiliating and ridiculous to him. His gaze darkens with determination. He does not intend to side with those he considers weak. Doubt only flashes for a moment as he questions even her prophetic knowledge. In response, the image of the prince emerges, alien and cold, like a symbol of strength and unattainable power, and yet the choice sounds firm. Among all of them, he leans towards the first prince, recognizing his superiority. There is a cold logic to his words. Behind the decision lies not a whim, but a desire to put an end to a debilitating war. He speaks soberly, emphasizing that both sides have already lost more than they could ever gain. As he gets closer, Igor changes his tone, turning the conversation into a tense game where every answer could become a trap. She faces a choice between two princes, symbols of different paths, and the future of the empire. The question sounds like a test. Which of them is capable of stopping the bloodshed and taking on the burden of peace? Natalie feels the answer is obvious, but its weight weighs heavier than any doubt. Behind this choice lies the will of the king, guiding the destinies of people like pieces on a board, and everything comes down to the first prince, whose shadow already looms over the future of the throne and the entire empire. In the radiance of truth, the king's will is revealed, not for power, but for the end of a bloody war. Hope shrinks into one name. Only by becoming emperor can the first prince stop this endless chaos. Igor squeezes Natalie's hand, coldly demanding that she reveal the secret meaning of the order and the connection with the first prince. Natalie stubbornly points out the contradiction: Khun's attack and their capture. Igor freezes, pain and hidden truth fighting in his gaze. He admits, it all started when crossing the border of the Lusker Empire. From the moment he entered the empire, Igor's condition rapidly worsened, his anxiety grew, and the premonition of disaster became unbearable. Igor, distorted by darkness, recognizes Khun, his body cracking under the pressure of an alien force, the enraged energy flaring up in a scarlet whirlwind, pushing away everything and letting no one in. His mind cannot withstand the magic. It breaks down, and he finally loses control of himself. Igor comes to his senses, realizing that madness has almost consumed his mind and left traces of destruction. Natalie watches anxiously as his figure disappears into the cold light and trembling silence. An understanding is born in him. In this madness, another essence is hidden, Eir. He reaches out to Natalie, holding her close, as if clinging to reality. The tension between them thickens, where gratitude mixes with dangerous closeness. Natalie keeps a discreet distance, hiding her anxiety behind cold politeness. Igor answers evasively, but his attention is focused on the disappearance of the grass. He approaches, sensing someone else's secret, and doubt gives way to overwhelming interest. Natalie reveals her motive. It's all for her sick foster sister. Confession freezes between them, breaking the previous tension. Igor suddenly bursts into laughter, where relief is intertwined with madness. Igor looms over Natalie, accusing her of a mad attempt to use force on him. He presses her with words, questioning her affection for her sister. A hint of mockery flashes in his gaze, where cruelty is intertwined with cold interest. Natalie calmly responds to the pressure, insisting that her actions are not motivated by hostility. Igor, playing on the edge of cruelty, presses on her weak spot, putting her sister's life at risk and testing her resolve. Recalling the past, she admits to disliking Sharon before her memory returned. Sharon seemed perfect, loved, bright, unattainable. Against this background, envy grew, warm and painful. Hatred was born from emptiness and one's own weakness. Even Sharon's kindness left a bitter mark. Her soft, warm voice sounds through the memory. In response, there was quiet agreement and a smile full of hidden feelings. Natalie, tormented by guilt, admits that hatred did not give rise to her desire for Sharon's death. A vow flashes in her memory. Her feelings were darker, but not murderous. Then she only sought to use the unknown power, driven by despair. Igor, shrouded in a scarlet glow, listens, hiding the storm behind a cold smile. His gaze becomes sharper, as if he already knows the answer. Natalie, holding back a tremor, rejects the pretense, demanding recognition of the truth. Natalie puts pressure on Igor, forcing him to admit the truth and his understanding of the situation. She reveals that she saved him not by accident, but because of the future she saw in her dreams. Her goal is to prevent an impending disaster, in which he plays a key role. She makes it clear that she needs him for this outcome. Igor perceives this with caution, sensing a hidden calculation. A tense alliance, full of mistrust, arises between them. She adds that he needs Chaim's herb to survive, linking their destinies. Natalie vows to save everyone, her resolve shining with a soft light. She approaches, forcing Igor to believe and accept her choice. His laughter breaks the silence, dangerous, full of hidden madness. Natalie freezes, realizing how unpredictable and distant he is. Igor enjoys the game with a predatory grin, finding the situation amusing and lively. He makes it clear that the prince no longer matters to him. Natalie, hesitating, nevertheless promises to fulfill his request, clinging to the chance. In response, a cold warning sounds. Retribution will follow for betrayal. His words end on a threat laced with grim determination. Natalie freezes, sensing the mortal danger lurking behind his calm. Natalie swears allegiance with desperate sincerity, trying to dispel his suspicions and maintain the precarious balance between them. Igor, smiling coldly, rejects the image of ER, openly expressing disgust and an internal conflict that he can no longer hide. His power spirals out of control, scarlet madness erupting around him, revealing a fractured psyche and mounting rage. Natalie, feeling threatened, gently but firmly stops him, preventing him from completely descending into destruction. Natalie, in desperation, demands that the magic be stopped, realizing that resources are running out and the cost of power is too high. Guilt overwhelms her. The blow came out on its own, because he was already losing control. Ire, cringing in pain, realizes the blow and the fragility of his own condition. Natalie, shaking with guilt before Igor, quietly asks for forgiveness, trying to smooth over the gap between them. Magic breaks the personality. When overloaded or shocked, a person changes, and Ier, trembling, barely holds on to the remnants of himself. He painfully realizes Igor's rift and the frightening truth about Khayyam, the force that sustained life but became the beginning of destruction. Having lost his dose of shame, Igor breaks down, and the magic bursts out, destroying control and reason. Even before the death of his soul, his personality cracks, falling apart under the pressure of force. The truth is revealed cruelly. Khayyam was only holding it in, protecting his body at the cost of the slow destruction inside. Natalie anxiously wonders, if Igor returns to his previous state, will Ire disappear? The thought becomes more acute. Two personalities, incapable of coexisting, collide in one body. In the tense silence hangs the main fear, whose personality will ultimately survive. Natalie realizes the reason for Igor's hatred towards ER, linking it to this split. Ire shows gentleness and care when he addresses her, as if trying to calm her anxiety. She doubtfully looks for a threat to Igor in him, peering into his face. Ire sincerely denies harm, confused by the question itself and her fear. Natalie accepts this, feeling a strange calm amidst the chaos. She comes to the conclusion, ER does not look like the one who hurt Igor. Natalie, hiding her tension, asks ER to remain quiet while she is gone. Realizing that Igor's life is no longer in danger, she decides to take advantage of the moment. She gently explains her departure as a necessary meeting, hiding the true reasons, carefully leaves instructions, touching ER, trying to maintain a fragile balance. Leaving IR, Natalie resolutely heads towards Roger Crawford. Realizing the danger, Natalie hurries to the Duke, ready to accept the consequences. Yar, immersed in quiet melancholy, wonders about Natalie's return and clings to fragile hope. Remembering her sad look, he feels growing anxiety and loneliness. Natalie realizes that Sharon is bedridden and therefore no longer comes to see her, leaving behind a void. The thought that help came from her brother hurts and worries her more than it comforts her. She doubts whether she has the right to rejoice in this, drowning in cold uncertainty. She understands that the old her would have drowned in quiet sadness, broken by this situation. But the current Natalie coldly cuts off the past, realizing that she is no longer who she was before. The coachman, noticing the rare visit, becomes wary and tries to understand who is hiding behind this appearance. Recognizing the guest as a familiar lady, he relaxes, considering the situation harmless. With a slight mockery, he makes it clear that her personality does not concern him, remaining an observer. The coachman admits that it is not the guest that worries him, but the young master of the house himself. He remembers how he was good-natured and open, but after the incident, he changed. Now there is a strange coldness in him, as if the former person has disappeared. Natalie senses this change and responds with a quiet, almost painful pity. The coachman, hiding his true thoughts, decides to leave, leaving behind a slight unspoken message. He delivers his words politely, but they convey a sense of awareness and quiet understanding of what is happening. Natalie realizes that he knew who she was from the start, and yet he helped her get here. Once at the gate, she feels fate itself leading her further, deeper into the dangerous game. She is trying to get to the bottom of why he became a soldier so early and went to war. Her thoughts take her into the past, to the events of 15 years ago and the hidden truth. There is only oppressive silence, where life is almost not felt. An empty mansion, full of ghosts and cold memories, emerges before her. She sees in him a man who seems to be deprived of his place and meaning in the world. His power wavers, leaving him fragile and dangerously close to destruction. But in memory, he remains the first hero who changed everything. And before her stands his name, Roger, connected with her destiny. The cold encounter repeats the past. Roger stands in the middle of the water, detached and empty. His gaze is ice, and an abyss in which there is neither warmth nor the previous feelings. Roger asks a question. But behind the words, there is wariness and hidden pain. Roger pushes him away coldly. Don't come any closer. The depths around him are dangerous and hide more than they seem. Natalie answers calmly, but behind her words, there is determination and a hidden goal that is not connected with him. Roger loses his composure, showing emotion and anxiety for the first time when he calls out to her. Natalie freezes, amazed by Roger's strength and condition, realizing how serious this is. The goddess of water reveals the truth. The cause of all the troubles is Natalie herself, and the blame lies with her. She coldly admits that the one she loves is suffering precisely because of her choice. Natalie is shocked to realize what she heard. Roger's name sounds like a death sentence. Her confidence crumbles. Fear and guilt overwhelm her, making it hard to breathe. She understands that the source of her suffering is herself, and there is no escape from it. As Natalie dives into the water, she feels as if she is drowning in her own feelings of guilt and pain. Natalie makes up her mind. She doesn't want things to go on like this anymore, because Roger always suffers when he saves her. She acknowledges his sacrifice and understands that every time he comes for her, even at the cost of himself, there is a firm resolve in her words to stop this and not let Roger suffer anymore. Roger rescues her and apologizes softly, holding her close despite his own pain. He admits that he is losing control of his power and that there is danger hidden in his calm. Natalie notices something strange. Roger can't see the water goddess, and this frightens her even more. Roger asks softly about her condition, hiding his fatigue and inner tension. Natalie is hesitant, trying to understand what is happening and the connection with the past. He offers to walk her home, carefully taking control of the situation. She refuses, but his gaze shows anxiety and suppressed feelings. Natalie insists on staying close, finding a reason not to leave him. Her words convey a light flirtation and a desire to get closer, despite the danger. Roger gives in, accepting her decision, though there is still hidden pain within him. Natalie is surprised. Roger agrees faster than expected, and this makes her slightly embarrassed. He warns about the state of the house, but there is already a quiet tension and closeness between them. Roger answers calmly, hiding his emotions, but his gaze betrays an internal struggle and doubt. Natalie notices his detachment. It's as if Roger is hiding something and doesn't want to let her into his world. Natalie is shocked. Before her is destruction. Everything is broken, as if a flash of power had occurred here. She notices the details. Not a single intact place. The chaos seems to have been created intentionally. The realization intensifies. Roger's house hides not just a secret, but the consequences of his power. Natalie is shocked. She realizes that Roger hid the truth and brought his home to ruin. His name sounds in her thoughts. Now it is clear who is behind this power and chaos. Natalie doubts herself, unsure if she deserves Roger's trust after everything that happened. Roger quietly denies her guilt, but his restraint conceals the depth of his experience. She asks a painful question, trying to understand why he remained silent until everything fell apart. Natalie blames herself, believing that she could have been there and prevented his fall. There is pain and regret in her gaze that she did not notice his condition earlier. Roger calmly reveals the truth. He wrote to her, trying to reach out to her from a distance. Natalie is confused. She hasn't received any letters and is starting to doubt what's going on. Tension arises between them. Someone has intentionally cut off their connection. Roger realizes this first and coldly draws a conclusion. Looking at her reaction, Natalie realizes something terrible. Their correspondence was intercepted, and they were separated for a reason. Natalie realizes that Roger's letters have been intercepted. Sharon, her father or brother, are under suspicion. The realization that a traitor could be nearby makes everything even more unsettling. Someone is constantly interfering, ruining Natalie's plans and preventing her from completing everything, as if playing a dangerous game against her. Roger tries to calm her down, convincing her not to give in to disturbing thoughts and not to look for enemies where there may not be any. But Natalie can no longer ignore the obvious. Suspicions are falling even on her own family, and this is what scares her most. Roger coldly states that it doesn't matter now, as if distancing himself from what is happening and from Natalie herself. Natalie doesn't accept this and asks again with alarm, feeling that he is ignoring an obvious problem. She points to the chaos in the room, trying to prove that everything is serious and that one cannot simply turn a blind eye. Roger answers briefly and harshly, "Yes," his gaze becoming frighteningly empty and detached. Natalie is left in disarray. His coldness and indifference hurt more than the disorder around her. Natalie can't stand it any longer and asks the main question. If everything is unimportant, why did Roger save her that day? She presses further, proving that without him, she could have died. and therefore his act was not in vain. Roger gently denies her conclusions and says that Natalie's family still cares about her, not wanting to delve into the painful subject. Natalie bitterly replies that it only seems that way to him because he doesn't know what it's like to be isolated and cut off from the world. She tries to smooth things over by admitting that she didn't mean to hurt him. Her words were dictated only by concern for him. Roger shares his personal pain. He also had loved ones, and if that child had survived, he would have been Natalie's age. But Natalie realizes something odd. There is no mention of family in Roger's story, as if he never had a brother or sister. Roger remembers that look, anxious, almost desperate, the way you look at a loved one when you're afraid of losing them. He notices that people have looked at Natalie in the same way before, with concern and hidden fear for her fate. He explains that her family is right to be afraid, because every step she takes outside could lead to danger, as it did today. Roger calmly admits that if he were part of her family, he would also be worried about Natalie and would not be able to remain indifferent. Then his voice becomes quieter. He realizes that the reason for their fear lies in himself, and he takes the blame. Realizing this, Roger sincerely asks for forgiveness, and Natalie silently accepts his words, holding back the heavy feelings inside. Natalie understands. Roger blames himself for everything and even convinces that the death of the younger one was predetermined by fate. She gently interrupts him, offering a different path. If he truly regrets, let him start trusting her. Natalie reveals part of the truth. Her knowledge of him is only fragments of the future seen in dreams, and not the full picture. Natalie admits honestly, she does not know the whole truth and cannot understand more unless Roger himself opens up to her. She calmly repeats that her knowledge is limited, and this makes the situation even more uncertain and fragile. With gentle insistence, Natalie asks him to tell her everything so that she can truly understand and fully side with him. Roger carefully asks about her feelings, trying to understand whether Natalie is angry or simply hiding her pain behind calmness. Natalie notices changes in him. He has become deeper, more complex, no longer the same person he was before. She admits that she previously had difficulty understanding his sincere emotions, and now she is only beginning to see the real him. Natalie admits that she herself is now beginning to feel what she did not understand before, becoming closer to Roger, almost to a whisper. She gently asks him what he is thinking, trying to get to his true feelings and thoughts. Roger avoids answering, hiding his emotions behind a cold nothing, and again distances himself from her. Unable to bear it, Natalie reacts sharply, flaring up and literally knocking this indifferent mask out of him. She accuses him of not admitting his feelings, reminding him how easily he let her go from his life. Natalie sheepishly asks why Roger is laughing, feeling like her words have hurt him more than she expected. Roger admits with a slight smile that she was much more worried about him than he thought, almost teasing her about it. Embarrassed and confused, Natalie looks away, unable to hide her feelings and awkwardness. She tries to justify herself by saying that he's just teasing her again, but her voice betrays genuine concern. At this moment, the tension between them becomes almost palpable when their eyes meet too closely. Natalie looms too close over Roger, and an awkward, almost dangerous attraction flares between them. Suddenly, a third one appears, grinning and suggesting that they go to a secret auction in the evening. He insists that Roger needs rest, as if trying to pull him out of his dark thoughts. He echoes softly, urging Roger to allow himself to relax a little and live. A stranger notices the tense scene and calls out to them curiously, ruining the intimate moment. Roger wearily admits that he knows about her concerns, but asks for advance warning in the future, hiding his awkwardness behind cool restraint. He checks to see if she understood his hint, trying to keep his distance and not show his true emotions. Natalie is embarrassed because she came without warning, and the guest teases her with a grin for her sudden visit, diffusing the tension with a joke. The stranger reminds her of the invitation to the auction, feigning an apology, as if he were afraid of interrupting their conversation. Roger coolly retorts that he didn't give his consent, but his words sound less confident than he would like. The guest confidently insists that Roger will definitely be interested if he learns about the auction, hinting at hidden motives and intrigue. He reveals the reason. A secret auction will take place in a majestic opera house right in the heart of the capital. The scale of the event is astounding. A luxurious stage, chandeliers, and an atmosphere full of intrigue and hidden intentions. The main act will be the performance of the legendary Nightingale of the Empire, a mysterious diva for whom all the nobility gathers. He hints that the main intrigue of the auction will be revealed only at its very beginning, among the hidden and dangerous secrets of the nobility. Roger waves it off indifferently, Pretending that he is not interested and does not intend to participate, Natalie becomes wary and cautiously asks about the mysterious Heim grass, sensing a catch. The guest is surprised by her knowledge, since the information is kept secret, and begins to suspect something is wrong. Natalie awkwardly jokes it off, hiding the truth as if she only heard it by accident, but the tension only mounts. Natalie recalls the secret auction, a place where desires have a price and hidden deals decide destinies, where gold rules. With money, you can buy everything, even forbidden secrets and dangerous treasures. The lots include rare and dangerous artifacts, too powerful to belong to a single owner. Buyers hide their faces behind masks, concealing their status and intentions in the shadow of luxury and secrecy, which is why this place is called a secret auction, a place where hidden deals, risk, and forbidden desires reign. Natalie feels uneasy. What is happening is deviating from the familiar plot, and something is clearly not going according to plan. She realizes that the auction was only part of the story, but now events are becoming much more complicated and dangerous. The world moves according to a script, but the stronger the interference, the more confusing and unpredictable the course of events becomes. Eamon's power remains sealed. He does not know the key to it, and even after the ritual, his abilities have not awakened. Igor's past is shrouded in darkness. He was on the brink of death, and his soul and personality were split and distorted. Natalie notices something odd. Roger has a younger sibling who shouldn't exist, and this ruins the logic of what's happening. She is plagued by doubts. Perhaps she has missed another anomaly hidden in the details of this story. The realization presses harder. The errors are piling up, and she is afraid that she herself has become part of this distorted plot. Natalie recalls that by birthright, she was to inherit the power of light, like the rest of their family. In their family, divine power awakens naturally, but its abilities never manifest. She begins to wonder if this is because Eamon's power has not awakened, and if there is a connection between them. Among the nobles, only she remained without a gift, and this is contrary to all the laws of their world. The answer leads to one name, Sharon Eilson, whose role in this mystery is becoming increasingly suspicious. Natalie suddenly comes to her senses, emerging from her heavy thoughts, and looks confused. Those around her notice her condition. She hasn't reacted for a long time, and seems lost in herself. She tries to hide it, pretending that she was just thinking, and that everything was under control. However, the anxiety does not go away. Her gaze reveals internal tension and absent-mindedness. An image of Sharon comes to mind, a painful memory that makes my heart clench. Sharon gently admits that their powers have faded in the same way, and there is an unsettling similarity between them, as if their destinies are intertwined. She carefully explains a possible reason, hinting at a connection to their origins and the power hidden in their blood. Natalie doesn't accept what she hears. Fear and denial are reflected in her eyes. She is not ready to believe this truth. The thought of the weakness of her origins develops into a disturbing guess. If she is an anomaly, then the very system of the world will turn against her. Reality seems to be failing. Images are falling apart, and alien hands are reaching out to it, intensifying the feeling of error and strangeness. She realizes the inevitability. The game will not let go. It will break her fate again and again, not allowing her to escape. Despair gives way to a gloomy acceptance. No matter how hard she tries to fight, the outcome seems already predetermined, but a quiet protest flares up inside. This is wrong, and she does not want to put up with such a fate. Natalie hesitates, admitting that she wanted to see the auction, but doubts and the tense situation hold her back. Roger watches her closely, sensing her uncertainty, and preparing to gently intervene to support and guide her decision. The young man gently approaches Natalie, inviting her to go to the auction with him. His words sound calm, but with obvious interest. Natalie becomes embarrassed, looks away, and touches her hair, trying to hide her excitement while she considers his unexpected offer. The young man, with a slight smile, notes that he does not look like a suitable companion, but nevertheless confidently offers himself in this capacity. Natalie is taken aback by his words. Her embarrassment intensifies, and she awkwardly tries to comprehend what was said, clearly not expecting such a turn of events. The young man takes Natalie's hands, the gesture unexpectedly close and too personal for the situation. Roger notices this and immediately tenses up. Cold discontent and hidden irritation appear in his gaze. The young man hints with slight persistence that Roger does not plan to go and gently nudges Natalie towards a decision. Roger remains cold and silent, his gaze growing more intense, but he does not intervene directly. Taking advantage of the moment, the young man holds Natalie's hands, increasing the closeness and showing his interest. He gently invites her to go to the auction with him, acting confidently and leaving no room for refusal. Natalie awkwardly tries to explain the situation, but her confusion only increases. The young man is clearly enjoying the moment, deliberately provoking Roger and playing on his reactions. Natalie becomes even more confused as things spiral out of control, leaving her completely bewildered. Roger abruptly stops what is happening. His voice becomes cold and hard, leaving no room for jokes. He openly expresses dissatisfaction, considering the young man's behavior unacceptable and a manifestation of disrespect for Natalie. Natalie is shocked by the change. The calm Roger shows such obvious and strong emotion for the first time. The young man turns everything into a joke with mocking ease, deliberately offending Roger and playing on his reaction. Natalie feels awkward and tired of his behavior, realizing that he does it on purpose. He continues to provoke, even making ambiguous hints, without hiding his interest. Roger responds sharply and coldly, his irritation now evident in an open and almost frightening manner. The young man immediately softens his tone, pretending to be innocent and retreating as if nothing serious had happened. In the end, he takes control of the situation again by offering an invitation to an auction and retaining the initiative. Roger coldly makes it clear that the decision is hers, keeping his distance and hiding his emotions. Natalie addresses him with gentle politeness, trying to ease the tension and not make the situation worse. She tries not to put pressure on him, showing that she respects his choice and does not want to force him. Roger notices her condition and infers her discomfort, showing attentiveness, albeit restrained. Natalie makes it clear, in a restrained but painful way, that he is unable to imagine her loneliness and isolation from the world. She realizes that she is not ready for the auction and does not want to cause Roger any unnecessary worry. Roger suddenly makes a decision himself, briefly indicating his involvement and taking control of the situation. Natalie remains in quiet surprise, her gaze softening, but still revealing an internal struggle. Roger gathers himself and addresses the servants decisively, attracting their attention and taking control of the situation. The servants respond, still concerned about Natalie's condition, but ready to carry out the order. The young man watches what is happening with a slight smile, as if it only amuses him. Roger gives clear orders to prepare Natalie for the trip and provide everything necessary. Servants are instructed to select a suitable dress, emphasizing the seriousness of his intentions. Natalie is stunned by the sudden change and does not immediately understand that he has actually decided to act. Roger addresses Natalie by name, confirming his decision and bringing her back to the reality of what is happening. The servants carefully prepare Natalie, decorating her and noting her beauty, trying to lift her spirits. Natalie quietly thanks them, gradually accepting their care and attention. She notices that there are few servants in the house, but they are all sincerely kind to her. Despite this, Natalie feels that the servants are wary and avoid unnecessary communication. Natalie notices the similarities between the maids, comparing them like sisters. The maid confirms this with a smile and notes that people rarely notice such details. They remember their past in the orphanage when they were still children. The girl says that the owner of the house took them in and gave them a new chance. It is mentioned that the owner is also connected to the same place, which makes Roger wary. The maid carefully stops the conversation, making it clear that it is better not to bring up the topic of the past. She emphasizes that one should not discuss the owners and their history. The second, although she has doubts, still shows curiosity and a desire to learn more. Natalie notices the tension, but gently makes it clear that she is not insistent and respects boundaries. Natalie calmly assures him that everything is fine and gently asks him to continue the story, showing genuine interest and a desire to hear the truth. Natalie gently makes it clear that if anything happens to Roger, it is important for her to know about it, as he is as dear to her as to anyone else. The maid begins the story with the events before Natalie's arrival at the estate. She recalls that the owner sometimes returned with severe wounds of unknown origin. One such incident was particularly memorable, causing great concern among the servants. At the time, everyone was sure that he could not have taken part in the battles, which made what was happening even stranger. The maid decides to ask her master about the reasons for his injuries, but he abruptly cuts off her attempt, not wanting to explain anything. His condition at that moment was so grave that conversation was impossible. The maid admits that such incidents used to happen all the time, and the servants lived in fear for their master. She suggests that this may be connected to the events of 15 years ago and Roger's own internal reasons. In his memories, it looks as if he is unknowingly leading himself to his own death. Natalie ponders, trying to understand why this is happening and if he has a reason for it. The maid adds that after Milady's arrival, such incidents began to occur much less frequently, and the servants are sincerely grateful to her for this. The maid cautiously suggests that with the appearance of Natalie, there may have been a change in the master's condition. Natalie clarifies whether she means his abilities, trying to understand the essence of what was said. The maid, knowing that Natalie is already aware of her master's powers, decides to speak more frankly. She hints that it is this knowledge that explains why his power is now so weak. Recalling the past, she adds that 15 years ago, the owner's condition was even worse than it is now. Having received the title, Roger's first act was to order the servants to be paid and leave the estate. His condition and behavior frightened those around him, which is why many servants decided to leave. The atmosphere in the house became tense, and the fear of the owner only increased. However, some people remained with him of their own free will, despite what was happening. The remaining servants believed that the master, despite everything, cared about their safety. However, after one tragic incident, everything changed dramatically. The details of what happened remained unknown, but the consequences were obvious. From that moment on, Roger himself changed. His character, his habits, and his whole life. Natalie latched onto the phrase, an accident, too vague to be true. The suspicion grew. There could have been something hidden in the death of Roger's parents. She recalled his behavior and oddities, the topics everyone avoided. The thought grew stronger. This was not an accident, but a secret that was being kept silent about. Natalie began to suspect Roger's connection with that tragedy. She couldn't claim to know the truth about that day, but doubts had already taken root. It became increasingly clear. Roger blamed himself for what had happened. The estate remained the same, as if frozen in time after the tragedy. The wealth and luxury remained unchanged, but there was a cold emptiness to it. Roger himself lived as if he was ready to disappear at any moment. Natalie realized that Roger's condition was much worse than it seemed, and he was balancing on the edge. The thought that without support, he might break down completely frightened her more and more. The servants revealed that the dress and the room belonged to the previous owner of the house. The realization hit her. She was being involuntarily put in someone else's place. Natalie doubted whether she had the right to accept this and stay here, but it all turned out to be Roger's own decision, which made the situation even more alarming. Roger's name sounded alarming to Natalie, as if confirming her hidden doubts. The maid made it clear that the truth would be revealed sooner or later, but now the time had not yet come. She noticed that Roger changed around Natalie, becoming calmer and even his former self. At the same time, the maid avoided unnecessary revelations, not wanting to burden her with the difficult truth, but it was obvious. They believed that Natalie already felt the same as they did, anxiety for him. Natalie showed up later than planned. Feeling slightly embarrassed by the delay, Roger was already waiting for her, maintaining his usual calm and restraint. She looked different, graceful, collected, as if ready for a new role. He immediately made it clear that time was short and that we needed to hurry. Natalie accepted this without objection, understanding the importance of the upcoming evening. Natalie carefully tried to understand why Roger was taking her with him, hiding her doubt behind the question. He reacted calmly, as if he didn't attach any importance to it. She insisted, wanting to hear the real reason, not the formality. Roger responded evasively, reducing it to a simple mutual favor. This answer did not convince her, leaving a feeling of incompleteness. For him, everything looked like just a formality, devoid of depth. Natalie didn't accept his answer, and carefully made it clear that she saw something more in what was happening than a simple formality. Her question became more direct, causing Roger to consider her words for a moment. He tried to avoid the issue, attributing it to her strange thoughts, and not attaching any importance to them. However, Natalie already sensed the hidden subtext and was not going to back down. The seemingly calm conversation gradually became filled with tension, which hid something important. Natalie tested the attachment hypothesis, but was convinced that the key mechanism was not working. Despite this, she is still able to influence Roger's condition, partially stabilizing his strength, which leads her to the conclusion that the problem is deeper and the system is only partially broken. The awareness of the contradiction increases anxiety, forcing her to look for a hidden reason for what is happening. The auction begins with a ceremonial announcement, creating an atmosphere of luxury and mystery. Guests are invited to study the catalog, hinting at the value and rarity of the lots on display. Natalie and Roger look through the list, trying to find the item they need. She notices that the Heim herb does exist, but is listed in a modified form. Hidden behind the guise of seeds is precisely the rare and dangerous resource they need. Natalie is determined to get the seeds at all costs, understanding their value. She understands the risk. Without special conditions, they will quickly perish, making them practically useless for most buyers. So competition for the lot will likely be low. Natalie clearly understood that turning to Amon's life-giving power was the only chance to cleanse the seeds and save them from destruction. A glimmer of anxious hope flickered in her thoughts. Only by not succumbing to the plague would they be able to germinate and preserve the thin thread of life. Her attention is drawn to the last lot, which is of particular interest. The hall is discussing a rumor. The post of the guild leader is up for auction. Hints from others indicate that the deal is dubious and conceals dangerous conditions. Rumors claim that the guild with a rich history is up for auction, along with the position of leader, but the terms of the deal are so harsh that some contracts have already been frozen. Natalie understands that to save Igora, she needs the guild as a cover and a tool of influence. She realizes that she will have to buy more, both power and access to information. The idea is becoming stronger. Everything you need can be obtained through an auction. She notices a change in her companion. His confidence is replaced by a hidden heaviness. Natalie admits she has a lot to buy and gently tests Roger's interest in bidding. He remains indifferent, making it clear that he did not come to shop. Then she gently nudges him to choose at least something for himself. She notices his detachment and hints that he should think about his own desires. Roger notes that the auction offers a wide selection and admits that there may be something worthwhile among the lots. Roger points to the display case and suggests examining a small dagger. They looked at the dagger for a while. Natalie picks up on this, gently hinting that such a weapon could be useful to him and does not seem like a random choice. Roger notices that Natalie puts herself in danger too often by hiding her concern behind a calm tone. She gently insists that he choose something for himself, trying to get him out of his indifference. He answers evasively, agreeing only to think about it without revealing his true feelings. There are whispers in the distance about a mysterious blonde who is attracting the attention of those around her. The question about Lady Rita was asked with a slight wariness, hidden behind the fan and mask, as if the name carried a shadow of incompleteness. A soft, almost graceful hesitation flickered in response, as if admitting a mistake had become a convenient way to hide unnecessary guesses. However, a suspicion flared in the depths of her gaze. The thought of her appearance with the Crown Prince left a disturbing trace that could not be easily erased. Her thoughts remained coldly focused. It didn't matter who he was with, only he himself and his choice mattered. The achieved result brought satisfaction, because everything that was planned was achieved, like a step towards a carefully constructed plan. However, a slight shadow of disappointment still slipped inside. What was desired turned out to be not complete, but only part of what was necessary. Confidence did not waver. Even without formal conditions, he would still intervene and support when the right moment came. The evening's outcome was one of soft warmth, not so much from success as from his presence and the subtle closeness between them. A soft curiosity, almost playful, flickered in her gaze as she tried to grasp his true attitude toward the past evening. He remained reserved, as if hiding more behind his cold calm than he allowed himself to show. There was a hint of uncertainty in her gestures, as if his aloofness had cut deeper than she had expected. His answer was even, and without unnecessary emotion, but in its brevity there was a rare admission. He truly enjoyed spending time with her. A quiet care appeared in his gesture, a desire to see her off, protecting her from the night chill and the lingering evening. The touch of his hands became a soft promise, which contained more than just a polite invitation to a new meeting. There was a lightness and warm compliance in her answer, as if she were allowing him to choose their next path, trusting her without unnecessary doubts. His short agreement was echoed with restrained joy, in which a subtle but sincere satisfaction was hidden. Sharon intercepted him at the door with slight concern, trying to understand where he was headed at such an inopportune moment. Anatole answered evasively and reservedly, making it clear that this was only a short departure, behind which there was something more than simple necessity. There was a quiet guess in her voice, filled with hidden jealousy, as she tried to guess his intention in heading towards Natalie. The reminder of the promise was lost almost painfully, and in this simple reproach, a vulnerability trembled that she could no longer hide. Weakened by illness, she still found the strength within herself to set a boundary, keeping him close to her, as if afraid of losing him completely. Sharon reminded Anatole of the ban with quiet but pressing insistence, as if testing whether he would remain true to her words. Anatole tried to soften the situation with a short excuse, but his hesitation betrayed an internal struggle. Sharon, weakened and vulnerable, still held on to him, putting an almost desperate affection into her request to wait. Her repeated pleas sounded unprotected, revealing the fear of being alone and losing him. Anatole gave in, taking her side, although his agreement felt like a heavy, not fully accepted sacrifice. Sharon quietly admitted that her condition was rapidly deteriorating, and in this admission, one could already sense not only weakness, but also hidden resentment. Her gaze became intense and heavy, as if she was forcing Anatole to admit a reason about which he would prefer to remain silent. There was a harsh, almost bitter conviction in her words. Natalie should not receive the love that, as she believed, rightfully belonged to her alone. Sharon, barely hiding her pain, reminded him of the price of her sacrifices, holding Anatole close, with a touch full of quiet dependence. There was a hint of bitterness in her confession. All of this was somehow connected with Natalie, and this thought hurt more than the illness itself. In the shadows of the mansion, Eir, hiding under his hood, noted the uneasy silence, realizing that Sharon's condition was still far from improving. His sudden appearance disrupted the flow of events, forcing them to confront an unexpected intimacy and tense recognition. His voice was low and almost demanding as he approached, asking a question that laced with jealousy, anxiety, and impatience. She calmly explained the delay as business, trying to sound convincing, but there was still an underlying tension in her tone. Igor caught it immediately. His short question was tinged with disbelief, as if he already knew there was something more behind it. His suspicion quickly took the form of an almost direct accusation, hinting at a meeting with another, and leaving her no room for evasion. She tried to explain herself, admitting that thoughts of him never left her, but her words were filled with confusion and inner discord. Igor approached, gently but insistently holding her gaze, offering her another path, a place next to him, where there was no need to hide, and where she could finally find peace. Igor came almost right up to her. His voice became softer, but in this closeness, one could sense a persistent attempt to keep her close to him. She pulled back, trying to think clearly, reminding him of the risk and the consequences that could ruin everything if they were noticed. He didn't accept any objections, offering the simplest option, to stay with him, as if ignoring the boundaries and rules that still mattered to her. A tired realization flashed in her gaze. Before her was a man who acted according to his own desires, without regard for anyone but himself. Igor leaned closer, enveloping her with words about the fear of loneliness, turning weakness into a subtle means of keeping her close. She answered calmly, reminding him of something else, and with this, she seemed to destroy the fragile closeness he had been counting on. His gaze darkened, irritation crept into his voice. The stranger's name became almost a challenge for him. She abruptly interrupted this game, returning him to reality, and in this gesture, one could feel the weariness of his obsessive persistence. Natalia calmly informed him about the prepared carriage, having thought out an escape route so that her departure would remain unnoticed and free of unnecessary questions, reminded him of the need for caution, as if she knew in advance how easily everything could turn against her. Without hesitation, pointing the way through the garden, Igor approached with gentle insistence. His voice sounded almost affectionate, but in this address, one could already sense a hidden test of her feelings. Natalia responded with slight bewilderment, as if this word had hurt her more than he expected. He merely chuckled, playing with the edges of their connection, deliberately blurring the line between intimacy and formality, as if pushing her to make a choice. His words contained a promise of a quick return, but behind them was a condition on which everything else depended. He leaned closer and touched her lips, reinforcing his demand without words, to leave everything and follow him or be left behind forever. Natalia froze, confused by his sudden closeness, trying to comprehend what had just happened and what it meant for her. Igor stepped back with slight confidence, as if he had already made his move, reserving the right to wait for her decision. She stepped forward, unable to hide the internal struggle, where doubts were intertwined with an attraction that was becoming increasingly difficult to deny. But his presence had already dissolved, leaving behind only silence and a feeling of incompleteness, which she now had to sort out for herself. The question about Sharon's condition sounded reserved, but there was tension hidden in it, as if the answer was already frightening in its inevitability. Anatole looked away, at a loss for words, and that pause said more than any confession. His quiet remark merely confirmed the obvious. Her condition was rapidly deteriorating, and there was little hope left. The thought that her body might not be able to withstand it hung like a heavy sentence, filling the space with oppressive silence. The decision sounded cold and unhesitating. She would have to resort to an extreme measure that would change everything completely. Anatole had difficulty admitting that the chosen method was only a temporary measure and was unable to save Sharon, hiding his growing despair behind his calm. The picture of her suffering became more and more unbearable. With each passing day, she faded, approaching the brink beyond which there would be no return. The Duke, observing this, felt the tension growing, realizing that the situation was getting out of control and required an immediate solution. A fierce denial of the inevitable flared up within him. He refused to accept the idea that even one of them could die. His gaze became cold and focused. If Sharon's condition did not change, she would have to make a choice that would have grave consequences. The Duke concluded coldly, turning to his son. The ban was no longer in force, and thus he made it clear that the line had already been crossed. Anatole tried to object, clinging to the facts and insisting that a violation was impossible, but his words already sounded uncertain. The Duke, without raising his voice, merely coldly doubted his confidence, and this short question sounded far more weighty than any accusation. Anatole, with increasing tension, admitted the thought that the ban might have been violated, and an anxious guess sounded in his voice. The Duke immediately hardened, making it clear that even the slightest suspicion required decisive action. The servant burst in, breaking the tense silence, and his alarmed appearance only increased the sense of impending disaster. The Duke was coldly distracted by the noise, but in his calm, one could sense a hidden readiness for the worst. The news of the missing Heimpool came as a shock, confirming that the situation had gotten out of control. The maid stepped forward, confidently declaring that what had happened had not gone unnoticed, thus destroying the last hope of uncertainty. Her words rang out clearly and without hesitation. It was Natalia who had taken the Heimpool at dawn, finally confirming the worst fears. Natalia became alert when she heard a familiar voice, and a mixture of hope and anxiety flashed through her mind. There was a cold irony in his words, as if he had immediately made it clear that he did not believe in either chance or its justifications. Anatole called her directly, demanding an explanation, and in this address, there was a sense of pressure and hidden accusation. She tried to remain calm, denying everything, but her reaction already showed tension and a desire to defend herself. His voice hardened as he voiced the real reason, the disappearance of the Heimpool, cutting off any further excuses. He moved closer, holding her, and there was a calculation in his words. Her actions only confirmed how bad Sharon was, that such a measure was necessary. Anatole coldly pushed her to confess, making it clear that there was no point in hiding it any longer, and that he was ready to take charge of the conversation in front of his father. Natalia took the blow calmly, admitting without hesitation that she was the one who had used the Heimpool, as if the decision had long been obvious to her. His restraint cracked for a moment. A short "what" betrayed confusion, in which surprise and growing tension mixed. Natalia flatly admitted that she had used the potion on herself, accepting the consequences in advance, and seemingly cutting off any excuses. Anatole felt the pressure of rumors sharply, realizing how easily her actions could be distorted and turned into an accusation. His words painted a bitter picture. She could be portrayed as jealous and cruel, as if she had deliberately harmed Sharon. He tried to guide her, suggesting that she return to her previous image in order to somehow protect herself from destructive speculation. But Natalia just calmly distanced herself from this struggle, accepting that the truth would not save her, because no one would want to hear it anyway. Entering the room, the Duke coldly reminded his daughter that previous misdeeds could be forgotten, but now she had gone too far. There was no softness or doubt left in his gaze, only a harsh realization that she had crossed a line from which there was no turning back. Natalia tried to object, but her voice broke off before it could gain strength, as if she already understood the futility of resistance. The Duke cut off any explanations harshly, reminding her of his power and that her words no longer mattered. His decision sounded like a death sentence. He was going to determine her future himself, depriving her of the right to choose and finally putting an end to it. There was no protest left in her calm, only a quiet awareness that without his permission, her fate was already sealed and did not belong to her. The thought of a repeated appeal echoed inside her with a cold emptiness, as if this was not the first time this had happened to her. Anatole spoke cautiously about marriage with the Belmosh family, realizing that this only confirmed the severity of his father's decision. There was a hint of disbelief in his voice, an attempt to dispute the inevitable, but even he already sensed that this was more than just a threat. The answer was ruthless. The chosen alliance was not a coincidence, but a calculation in which power and profit were more important than her will or feelings. Natalia, in a reserved but firm manner, made it clear that this marriage would not be a union, but just another formality, devoid of meaning and future. There was a determination in her voice. If they wanted to give her away, she would choose the one who would become her destiny, and she would do it without delay. The Duke cut her off coldly, making it clear that the choice had already been made for her, and other options were not even being considered. She didn't back down, asking questions that were accusatory. The fear of her choice betrayed the family's true intentions. The final blow was quiet but painful. The reminder of his mother laid everything bare, making him question whether there had been anything more than calculation in this decision. The Duke, unable to contain his anger, raised his hand sharply, and the tension in the room instantly escalated to the limit, but the blow missed its target. Antonio intercepted it, standing between them, breaking the usual order and challenging authority. Natalia froze, shocked by this act, because she least expected protection from him at such a moment. Natalia tried to understand in confusion why Anatole had intervened, still not having recovered from his sudden defense. Anatole calmly smoothed over the situation, making it clear to his father that explanations were no longer necessary and that everything was already clear. His words conveyed a cold submission to the order in which her fate had already been decided, and she would inevitably submit to the will of the Duke. The silence after this became heavy, as if reinforcing the immutability of what was happening and breaking the last hopes. Natalia, clasping her hands, bitterly realized that she had once believed in his feelings, but now nothing remained of that faith. Natalia quietly admitted that all this time she had been missing simple warmth, even through the cold of prohibitions and indifference that had surrounded her since childhood. There was a tired pain in her words. She tried to understand them even when Sharon was put above her, deprived of her place in the family. But now something inside her had snapped, and that calm, enough, had become a line she would no longer allow to be crossed. The Duke responded coldly, rejecting the very thought of her vulnerability, as if her feelings had never mattered to him. Natalia broke the tension with a slight, almost mocking smile, as if what was happening could no longer hurt her as much as before. The emptiness of the years she had lived came to her mind. Everything she had achieved in this house had turned out to be devoid of meaning and warmth. The past and present intertwined, pushing two versions of her together, as if reminding her that she was no longer who she had been before. The realization became alarmingly clear. Everything that was happening was going beyond the boundaries of familiar reality, turning into something strange and frightening. Anatole called out to her with tension, but his voice no longer held its former softness, only restrained irritation. The Duke stopped him coldly, not allowing him to interfere, as if what was happening no longer required anyone's protection. His words fell upon Natalia like a heavy accusation in which all the discontent and fatigue of her existence had accumulated. He pulled away completely, allowing her to do whatever she wanted, but making it clear that she would now bear the consequences. Natalia accepted this without a fight, with bitter calm deciding to disappear from their lives as if she had never existed. Natalia realized with detachment that this family no longer had any significance for her path, as if everything that connected her with them had finally been severed. There was only one goal left in her thoughts: to survive until the end, to hold on at any cost, not allowing herself any more weakness. She coldly drew a line, deciding that nothing connected her with the Aylesden house anymore, even if it had previously seemed impossible. Later, this story turned into rumors, in which it was whispered that Natalia's true situation turned out to be much more terrible than Sharon's. Natalie, with a worried look, reflects on how her consciousness continues to exist in spite of everything. The maid quietly reports the serious illness of two girls, hinting at the events that changed their destinies. Natalie, overcome by weakness and vague feelings, loses memories of the past, which no one can bring back. The Duke prepares the cure, but gives it not to Sharon, but to Natalie, making a choice that will change the destinies of both. Natalie quickly recovers, while Sharon, having survived, remains weak and sick, paying for someone else's salvation. The maid bitterly admits that Sharon, not Natalie, should have been saved, and this mistake still haunts them. In her thoughts, the maid suggests that after what happened, the Duke will finally realize his fatal mistake. Natalie stands silently to the side, her gaze cold. She understands more than she says out loud. The Duke, with cold determination, admits that he was with Natalie, accepting the consequences of his choice. The girl says with restraint that the request was difficult, but she still fulfilled it to the end. With gratitude, she turns to her father, claiming that now Natalie will remain in this house. The decision sounds final. Natalie will stay for a long time, because this, in their opinion, will be better for everyone. Natalie turns around at the sudden noise, her gaze calm, but deep down, there is wariness. The maid asks the question with a slight smile, doubting that everything was really fine. She coldly admits, no one in this house really cared about Natalie. Natalie quietly agrees, turning away as if accepting the bitter truth. With cold determination, Natalie admits that she wants to disappear from this house. Turning around again, Natalie smiles softly and asks for help, hiding much darker intentions behind it. Natalie quietly asks for help to get out of the mansion unnoticed. Her voice is calm, but there is a hidden determination in it. With a slight smile, Natalie offers jewelry in exchange for help, hinting that it will be beneficial for both parties. The maid freezes, her gaze tense. She understands that before her is not just a request, but a dangerous proposal. The maid's voice is heard from behind the door, breaking the silence and making Natalie wary. The maid understands that now is the best moment to escape, when the servants are busy and no one will notice their disappearance. Natalie hesitates, realizing that she will be easily recognized and that it will not be easy to leave secretly. The maid confidently suggests a plan. Wait until night, when everyone is asleep, to leave the mansion unnoticed. The maid confidently explains that in her clothes, Natalie will easily remain unnoticed among the servants. A memory flashes. Natalie used to pretend, hiding behind a false image. The maid shows the way. Through the corridor, you can go out into the garden and escape through a hole in the fence. Natalie freezes, looking at her differently, as if she were seeing the real her for the first time. The maid notices this look with embarrassment and does not understand what exactly has changed. Natalie remarks with a slight smile that the maid is not as bad as she might seem at first glance. The girl responds shyly, reminding him that she is just Sharon's maid and nothing more. Natalie calmly notes her help, surprised that she didn't tell everything to her father. The maid, confused, justifies herself, admitting that she is doing this for Sharon's sake. Natalie quietly accepts this answer, as if she had already understood everything for herself. The maid thanks him for his words, but her gaze betrays her anxiety about what will happen next. The maid notes the changes in Natalie with doubt, not believing that she has really become different. Natalie accepts these words calmly. Her gaze is now confident and alien to her former naivety. She confidently talks about escaping, hoping to intercept the carriage and disappear. In her thoughts, Natalie says goodbye to the past, coldly closing this story to herself. She realizes that everything could have turned out differently, if not for fatal mistakes. The maid still has doubts, and quietly asks if Natalie is really ready to leave right now. Natalie calmly reminds him that she must fulfill her promise before leaving, maintaining a cool confidence. The maid carefully asks if she has a plan, but in response, she feels only tension and hidden doubts. Natalie quietly admits uncertainty, her gaze growing deeper and heavier. Left alone with her thoughts, Natalie wonders which of the three men she should turn to now. The girl with the tray quietly asks to open the door. Her voice sounds calm, but there is a hidden insistence in it. Hearing Natalie's name, the man freezes, not immediately realizing who is standing behind the door. With a slight smile, she introduces herself as Sharon, hiding her true intentions. He, still hesitant, allows her to enter, not suspecting what this meeting will lead to. Sharon quietly calls him brother, a cold pity in her voice. She notices the wound on Anatole's face, carefully looking at his condition. Touching him, Sharon hints that the reason for his pain is connected with Natalie, increasing the tension between them. Sharon coldly asks if Natalie hit him again, watching Anatole's reaction closely. Anatole calmly denies it, admitting that he took the blow himself, protecting Natalie from her father's wrath. With a hint of sympathy, Sharon notices his pain and offers him wine. Bringing the glass closer, she gently urges him to drink, assuring him that it will make things easier, but she has a different intention behind it. Anatole, succumbing to Sharon's words, agrees, his gaze becoming empty and detached. Under her influence, he begins to believe that Natalie should be forgotten, convincing himself that it will be better for both of them. Natalie appears in a radiant image. Her beauty is cold and detached, as if she is already outside of the previous reality. In a luxurious hall, she is offered a choice, hinting that the moment for decision has already arrived. A noble man confidently declares that he believes in her choice in his favor, extending his hand. Natalie looks around in confusion, not understanding how she ended up here and what is happening around her. Blinded by what is happening, she tries to comprehend the situation, getting lost in a whirlwind of light and other people's expectations. Prince Eamon takes a confident step forward, offering Natalie the safest way to end this game. He promises to elevate her to Empress, extending his hand and opening the path to power before her. With a warm yet insistent smile, Eamon vows to fulfill her every wish, seeking to sway her to his side. The Duke coldly remarks that if the lady does not wish this, no one has the right to decide for her, and he asks in a reserved tone what she intends to do next. Prince Aemon is displeased that he is interfering between him and Natalie again. The man calmly introduces himself as Duke Roger Crawford, openly entering into confrontation. Natalie demands an explanation with cold calm, wanting to understand what is really going on around her. Hearing the address, "Sister," she freezes. Her gaze changes. There is more hidden in this word than it seems. Igor mockingly asks why she needs so many men around her, admitting that it is unpleasant for him. Surrounded by flames, he confidently declares that in the end, Natalie will still choose him. With a smug smile, Igor claims that only he is capable of giving her what she is looking for. The three men agree on one thing. Only Natalie herself must make the choice, and no one has the right to decide for her. They confront her with the inevitable. To reach the end, she must choose one of them. Sitting in front of them, Natalie freezes, feeling the weight of the decision on which everything depends. In silence, she collects her thoughts, preparing to pronounce the choice that will change her destiny. Natalie slowly comes to, her gaze clouded, as if she had just emerged from a strange dream. She convinces herself that everything she saw was just an illusion caused by fatigue and stress. But doubt remains. She feels that the end is near, and this is not just a dream. Having collected her thoughts, Natalie decides to focus only on achieving her goal. That same night, she secretly leaves Eilisten, as if fleeing her own fate. She understands that if she stays there, she will not be able to see the worthy ending that she so desires. Natalie understands that a secret meeting with Prince Aemon in the palace is now impossible due to strict security. She realizes that Igor's presence is dangerous, as his discovery will lead to serious consequences. Having thought out a plan, Natalie decides to hide him in a secluded house that has recently been put up for auction. Natalie decides that the safest place to wait out the time is Crawford's house, with whom Eilisten tries to avoid crossing paths. Unlike the palace, simple and kind people live there, not drawn into dangerous intrigues. With a slight smile, Natalie makes her decision, confident in the path she has chosen. But deep down, she wonders if Eisen is looking for her, and what that will ultimately lead to. Natalie realizes that everything around her is just an illusion of the game, and after it ends, their paths will diverge forever. She decides to end everything as soon as possible, before she becomes even more attached to them. Waking up, Natalie returns to reality, trying to keep her cool. Roger appears behind her, noticing her awakening and breaking the silence of the room. Smiling reservedly, he demands an explanation, making it clear that he no longer intends to remain in the dark. Roger calmly notes that Natalie ran away in the middle of the night without any explanation, watching her closely. With a slight smile, Natalie asks to be allowed to stay here for a little while longer. Roger cautiously asks how long her stay will last, not hiding his doubts. Natalie admits that she will not leave until her father stops trying to marry her off. She firmly declares that she does not want to be a bargaining chip and intends to choose her own destiny. Looking into her reflection, Natalie quietly asks for permission to stay, testing whether Roger will agree to her terms. Roger accepts her decision with a slight grin, hiding his irritation behind calm. He coldly remarks that she is difficult to deal with without hiding his attitude. Roger warns her that when the time comes, she will have to explain herself. Natalie calmly agrees, her smile remaining confident and unwavering. Natalie gently touches his hand, promising that she will not stay longer than necessary. She confidently states that their union is mutually beneficial, and Roger also needs her help. With a warm smile, Natalie admits that she counts on him and considers him important to her. When she calls him by name, she looks him straight in the eyes, hinting at possible trust, or something more. Life at the Crawford estate is becoming calmer for Natalie, but she still has a lot of unresolved issues ahead of her. Among the papers and notes, she tries to figure out the situation, realizing how confusing everything is. Natalie realizes that time is running out, and she can no longer put off decisions. Going through the evidence, she comes to the conclusion that only Aemon can shed light on what is happening. Having made her decision, Natalie plans to go to him the very next day, but first she decides to deal with Heimpel in order to get closer to the solution. Natalie stops at the door, pausing for a moment as if collecting her thoughts. The young man informs her that His Majesty is currently absent, forcing Natalie to change her plans. The man, noticing Natalie, recognizes something in the situation connected with Aemon and becomes wary. Natalie calmly clarifies where His Majesty is now, trying to maintain her confidence. He hesitates, clearly considering whether to reveal the information. Natalie emphasizes the urgency, making it clear that talking to Eamon is urgent. Hearing the alarm in her voice, the man becomes wary and guesses that the matter is connected with Eamon. Having made a decision, he agrees to help and offers to take Natalie to His Majesty. Leading her through the corridors of the palace, he informs her that Eamon is already here, very close. Natalie, looking around, wonders with slight surprise whether there are truly quiet places in the palace. In the garden, she notices Eamon and turns to him, calling out to him, "His Majesty." The prince turns around with a soft smile, clearly expecting this meeting. Coming closer, Natalie greets him politely, remaining calm and hiding her true intentions. Eamon asks in surprise how Natalie ended up in such a secluded place. Natalie notices his loneliness, gently hinting at the strangeness of his presence here. Their attention is drawn to a white kitten that appears in the silence of the garden. Eamon explains with a smile that it is the Empress's pet, rare and expensive. He notices that the kitten is reaching out to Natalie, as if it had immediately accepted her. With a slight sadness, Eamon admits that he would like to keep him, but he cannot go against the will of the Empress. Natalie strokes the kitten tenderly, but a cold suspicion about its future fate flickers in her thoughts. She doubts that the Empress will really look for her pet if it disappears. Eamon calmly replies that it doesn't really matter to the Empress. With a slight smile, he admits that sincerity is rare in the palace, and almost everything here is built on lies. From Eamon's words, Natalie understands that the Empress is capable of much more cruel acts than it seems. She is not just cold-blooded, she is alien to compassion, and the fates of people for her are just a game where even the strong become victims. The Empress's appearance instantly changes the atmosphere. Her presence feels like a hidden threat. Young Eamon gives her a gift with a naive smile, unaware of the consequences. He sincerely shares his desire to please her, hoping for approval. The Empress responds with cold mockery, hiding cruelty behind soft words. The memory ends with alarm. It was this moment that became the beginning of a deep trauma for Eamon. The Empress coldly admits that she herself poisoned the man who gave her a child, without hiding her cruelty. Little Eamon, horrified, tries to justify what is happening, unable to accept the truth. In response, he encounters only contempt and aggression, deprived even of maternal protection. Cruelty becomes the norm. This attitude shapes his world from childhood. Left alone with fear and pain, Eamon is confronted early on with a darkness no one should be prepared for. Natalie feels uneasy as she remembers what Eamon went through in that cold palace. Stroking the sleeping kitten, she wonders how warmth and peace can exist in such a place. With a soft smile, Natalie remarks that the baby bears a striking resemblance to Eamon, and Eamon quietly agrees, reminding him that he, too, is damaged goods from the imperial palace. Natalie doesn't immediately understand his words, asking again what he's talking about. Eamon calmly explains that the kitten was banished from the palace because of its origins. He coldly adds that for the Empress, such creatures are just a marriage unworthy of existence, which makes Natalie freeze.